Hey, what's up? This is Gary from Raz Rentals. And guess what? It's April, everybody. You know what that means. It's time for Target and NECA's Haulathon. Time to take out a loan so you can buy all the 500 TMNT action figures that NECA decided to drop all at once. Not to mention, pay off all of the gallons and gallons of gas you've been burning up driving to every Target in your local area since early to mid-March. Did my Target get them already and sell out? How can people in New Jersey get them, but Pennsylvania doesn't have them yet? Are all the scalpers buying them? Are the workers buying them before they go out on the shelf? Why don't the workers ever know what I'm asking about in the toy aisle? How can they not know what the Ninja Turtles are? Why do they think I'm insane? You know, every year I see people posting pics weeks in advance of Haulathon's official start date, and every year my Targets don't get anything until the last minute. You know, that's when I found this shredder here, April 6th, the official start date of Haulathon. Now look, I know I sound like I'm complaining, but mostly this is all jokes, all right? I do really like all of these great action figures from NECA, and I'm glad that they're, keeping the Ninja Turtles relevant. I just kind of wish that they would spread them out a bit, because they always have this huge drop here, and then what? Isn't there like another huge drop in like June or July? Like give me a little time here. The good thing is with the Mirage figures, you can get them later at Big Bad Toy Store, or even find a lot of them just still on Target still. A lot of them are not really selling out, which is great. Besides, I should be happy, right? Because right here on my table is the much anticipated, redesigned Fred Wolf Shredder. He's finally here. Since NECA released their original Shredder back in 2017, some fans were happy to finally have a Fred Wolf Shredder, but some knew that he wasn't as accurate as he could be, He had wraps on his forearms. I think his shin guards, the blades are sort of to the side, but they're not over to the side as much as they should be, I think. Not to mention, he's not the right height, and he's also just a repurposed Mirage Shredder, They built this guy off of the Mirage body, so he doesn't have the bulk or proportions that the Shredder should have from the cartoon. He wasn't the perfect Shredder that we were all longing for. My anticipation for this figure really skyrocketed when NECA released their Archie Shredder. At the time, I felt like this was the best Shredder action figure ever made, and that was only a couple months ago. I think he's a pretty awesome action figure, and I was really excited for this Fred Wolf Shredder because he shares the same body as this guy. Obviously the shin guards and all the armor is different, but size and proportions, that's this guy in there. I think even though I love the Archie comics Shredder, this right here is the Shredder I've been waiting for 38 years, I always wanted the Fred Wolf Shredder, even as a kid, playing with that Playmate Shredder. He just never lived up to Shredder in the cartoon. So, will this guy be the Shredder we've all been waiting for? Let's find out. Shredder 2 here was released in NECA's standard Ultimate package design. It resembles, the VHS tapes that we all grew up with. And yes, I know I always mention this every single review of these, but I got to, because every review may be someone's first review, right? So it looks like the old VHS covers. I like how, the Shredder on here is colored to look kind of like the Playmate Shredder. It's almost got the same exact sized head as this one on this new one. But see, this one has a title and everything. The title of this volume is Start Shredding the News. And he's the 20th release in this series, volume 20. He cost $34.99, which is just getting a little bit ridiculous now. This cover art was illustrated by the amazing artist Aaron Hazuri. I think he has a great cartoony style. Plus, I think he exceeds at drawing the characters a model. You can actually find him on Facebook and Instagram if you want to check out more amazing artwork by him. He does a lot of cool custom stuff. I don't know if he's taking commissions at the moment, but he was there for a while. I know he was also selling prints, and that's how I got this thing, I just love this thing. I think it's nice that he included all of these supervillains here on the cover, like Krang, Rat King Baxter, Slash, Leatherhead, and I especially like that he included Smash, because I feel like Smash was a cool character, even though he was only on one episode. And you have Mr. Og here, who I hope NECA is like, teasing that we might get a Mr. Og action figure. That would be great. I also think that the idea of Shredder having a Turtle Booers Club is hilarious. Like, I could totally see this in one of the season 3 or season 4 episodes when the cartoon was at its most wackiest, you know? And I also just kind of like the term Turtle Booers. It just sounds funny to say Turtle Booer. It reminds me of in The Simpsons when Smithers is trying to tell Mr. Burns that everybody is saying Boo Earns instead of saying Boo. I was saying Boo Earns. On the side here, this continues the VHS style. This is volume 20. Volume 20. Here's a little look at all the covers that I have so far. I'm missing, I think, Space Usagi. If you continue to the back, there's some more great stuff on here. It continues to emulate the style of the old VHS tapes, where you kind of have like some nice painted artwork down the bottom. This one is like an actual like full back piece. There are some new elements here, like these cool action shots. The top one up here looks so moody. You know, the lighting is very moody, you know, as Shredder stares at his helmet, contemplating. Why, oh why, did I ever think it would be a good idea to incorporate this 10-pound hunk of metal into my costume? Sure, it makes me look like a badass, but I wish I knew I was going to be wearing it for 10 years. My gosh, my neck has been killing me. And then you have the one on the bottom where Shredder's holding the Medi-Laser. I think that one kind of looks like a commercial, like, hurt on the job? No insurance? Don't worry. Call 1-800-SHRED-MED. The main image here is another exciting piece of artwork by Aaron Hazuri. You better hurry up, Donnie. Somebody's trying to kill you there. I also like how Krang is peeking his head from behind Shredder's leg. You know, I think it looks like, you know, he was just trying to fill up some space, which is great, you know. Fill up some of that negative space with more Ninja Turtle characters. I love it. Another amazing thing on the back of this is this hilarious blurb from the Turtle Booers Club meeting, right? It says, I, President Shredder, hereby call this meeting of the Turtle Booers Club to order. The following members are present: Krang, Mr. Og, Smash, Rat King, Baxter, Leatherhead, Slash, Bebop, and Scumbug. Scumbug didn't make the cover, but I'm glad there's a mention of him back here. The following members are absent: Trag, Chrome Dome, Anthrax, Tempestra. Again, I'm really hoping that Tempestra makes it into this NECA series. It's either time for an Ultimate Tempestra or a Mr. Og and Tempestra 2-pack. The following members were not invited: Ray Fillet. Now that one gets a little funny, right? Because Ray Fillet was actually never in the cartoon. There's actually a generic fish villain named Ray in the episode Rebel Without a Fin. The Maestro. Now, I'm okay with the Maestro not being invited into this club because the Maestro was a pretty lame villain from season 4's Leonardo Lightens Up. You know, he's just like one of those generic, stereotypical music villains. He should have been on like the 66 Batman series, you know. He could have fit in with the Archer. No, wait. What's the Liberace? What was his name? He was Shandell and Harry. Come on, if you're gonna like name the good one Shandell, you should probably name the other one like Lear or something like that. Come on, guys. And then it continues, and that Snake Eye, whose name we can't recall. The Snake Eye is Rudolph Cobrato from the season 6 episode Snakes Alive. Another amazing character that I would love for NECA to make an action figure of. Let's see here. New business. Smash nominates the Swatter for Turtle Booer membership. All in favor? None. I'm sure Shredder will want him in there, you know, because he looks like a parody of the Shredder. He'd be like, why are you stealing my essence? This is what Dane Cook said to that one comedian who he felt like he was ripping him off. All right. Today's agenda includes approving the following schemes to destroy the turtles. Firstly, poisoning the city pizza supply. Motion approved. Secondly, infiltrate Channel 6 and unplug all of their equipment during happy hour news. Motion approved. Thirdly, attempted to turn off the gravity again, but this time we'll do it better. Motion approved. This meeting is callously concluded. Remember, next month's meeting will be held in the abandoned chemical factory across town as the Technodrome was rented out for the Triceraton Federation's rapacious reptile roundtable. Man, why do they gotta make this so hard to read? I almost forgot. Lastly, signups are open for the Sinister Summer Softball League. All of that is great. I approve of it all. And boy, what a bummer it is to realize that the Triceratons never even met Shredder and Krang. Like, could you imagine having a crossover episode where the Triceratons are hanging out in the Technodrome? Maybe the Triceratons and the Rock Soldiers could all like team up to fight the turtles, but then they don't like each other, so they start fighting, and then Krang's like, oh my gosh, why are they all fighting each other? And then they could, like, destroy his throne in the portal room. If you go back to the front and look on the bottom, it says here, Director, Randy Falk, Trevor Zammit, Sculpt and Fabrication, Tomasz Rajowski, Kriswara Studios, Tailoring, Susan Capone. Now that's actually a name I don't recognize before. Paint, Jeff Trapp, Mike Puzo. Prototypes, Roger Fernandez. Photography, Stephen Mazurik. Packaging, Travis Hasback. Illustrations, Aaron Hazuri. Accessories include Chef Hat, Kojima Brothers Diary, Graphics Disc, Amulet, Shredder Bucks, Medi-Laser, Framed Picture, Interchangeable Heads and Hands, and then of course Nickelodeon, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, NECA, all of that stuff. And don't worry, we're going to go over every single accessory inside of here, and I'm going to discuss it excessively to the point where you're just going to want to shut this video off. If you open this up and you look right here, there's a fantastic shot of this Shredder action figure. I think he looks great here. He looks incredibly imposing. There's just something about him, like with that cape draped over his shoulders. Like, he looks jacked, man. He looks like he actually looks like a force to be reckoned with. Like, he actually seems like a threat that the turtles might have a little difficulty with. And then, of course, the main event here, right? You have the actual Shredder action figure, and he looks great too. As usual, the bubble here, or the window, is nice and big, so you can see all of Shredder's body, plus all of the great accessories that are included in this box. Some of these are pretty obscure, like the chef hat especially is incredibly obscure. Some of these I'm sure are items a lot of people have wanted, especially like the Eye of Sarnoth helmet. So, let's quit wasting time. Now it's time for me to open them up, move them around. Hopefully nothing's broken. I swear, if I have to try to get another one of these, I'm going to freak out. And I will talk to you in a second. So here he is, free from his prison of cardboard and plastic, ready to face the turtles dozens and dozens of times and fail over and over and over again. Fail to the point where you probably start to feel sorry for the poor guy. I mean, come on, Shredder. Maybe someday you and Krang will get that Technodrome on the surface and you'll be able to kill the turtles and take over the world. I'm rooting for you, buddy. I've bought many, many Shredders in my time, but I gotta say, this guy looks amazing. He looks imposing. He looks just like the cartoon. He's the Shredder that I always wanted. Back in the day, I had the 88 Shredder, and man, he just did not do anything for me. He was one of the only times where I felt like I preferred the cartoon version over the toy version. Lots of times I'd rather the toy, but I did not like this design at all. And he's like so scrawny. He didn't have a shirt on. And what was up with that? Then after what felt like 1,000 years, NECA put out the cartoon Shredder we always wanted, or at least this was the one we always thought we wanted, but As you can see, this guy next to this guy, the new Shredder makes the old Shredder look obsolete. The brand new one has better colors. I think the sculpt is nicer, and just there's things about the suit that even though they're similar, they're just not 100% cartoon accurate. This Shredder is really not a bad Shredder. It's just he's not as accurate as he could be. And I don't know, I just like the brand new build. I mean, look at him. He looks he's taller than him, and he just looks more menacing and tougher. Looking at these two Shredders side by side, you really start to notice some things. This Shredder body, the majority of this, was actually sculpted all the way back in 2008 when it was the Mirage Shredder body. And then they, added this overlay and these spikes and, stuff like that to make him the cartoon version in 2017. So this body, the cartoon version was released almost 10 years ago, but the actual body itself was sculpted almost 20 years ago. And in that time, some things have stayed the same, double jointed knees and elbows, better hip joints on the new NECA action figures. I do like how NECA's torso, even though you have this very noticeable cut in the upper torso here, I do like that more than the overlay, because I don't know, there's just something about this soft overlay that looks a little wonky or even a little warped or something like that. Like something's off about it. One of the newer NECA things is now they have pinless elbow joints. Probably the knees too. So I mean that's cool because now you don't even notice that except for the this piece in the middle there. The other thing I would say, looking at these guys side by side, is I just like the way his arms look a lot more. Everything looks a lot more flush. There's just something very scrawny and almost, I don't know, underdeveloped about these weakling arms that the original Shredder has. Even though they're muscular, they just don't match what you would expect from cartoon Shredder. And yeah, I know Shredder changes a little bit throughout the cartoon, but not much. I honestly think the best looking Shredders are the Shredders from season 1, because I love how they paint all the highlights and stuff on the metal, especially the mask. Except, there's one episode in season 1, A Thing About Rats, where he just looks a little wonky, a little more cartoony, but the other episodes are done pretty well. I would say seasons 2 through 4, you get a lot of really cartoony looking Shredders, where I don't feel like he looks intimidating at all. Sometimes you might have a really good looking Shredder, and then the next episode you'll have one that looks very cartoony and almost goofy, kind of funny looking. I think things start to tighten up around season 5 and 6, but I think the best looking Shredder, maybe even better than season 1, is the Shredder in season 7. He's tightened up more. The cartoon has become, I don't know, it just consistent, maybe. The whole show looks a little more consistent. It's a little darker than the earlier seasons. And if you look at him in episodes like Night of the Dark Turtle, he just looks menacing and threatening and really, really cool looking. Season 8, it's okay. I don't know, it's maybe as good as 7, but I don't think it is. It looks good, but it's not as good, I think, as he appears in season 7. And not the vacation episodes. The vacation episodes can be really bad with animation, but I'm talking about proper season 7. Starting with the head, you can see that the helmet matches the color of the cartoon a lot more than this original Shredder. I feel like the original Shredder is almost like a light blue color. It's not really gray as it appears in the cartoon. I would say that the brand new helmet also has much more of the proportions of what you see in the cartoon. Although it doesn't have the cell shading that this original one has. The proportions of this brim here, that definitely matches the cartoon a lot more than this original one with this like sort of like flat front here, fat front here. I also like the, even though it's just eyes and eyebrows, there's something about this expression in the face. He definitely looks a lot more meaner. Like, he definitely looks a lot more like Shredder in the cartoon, especially with those big black eyebrows. One thing I prefer on the original Shredder is that really sharp crease down the center of his mask. The brand new one is a little soft and not as defined. And I like how if you look at the bottom of the chin, like the helmet seems to go further down, so you don't really see the chin underneath. This one, they kind of like added a little bit of his skin right there. I don't know, it's kind of... I feel like the mask should go down a little further and cover that up. And then also, there seems to be a quality problem right here on mine. Oh, look at that. I thought, oh my goodness. I thought that was an ink line there. Turns out it's just part of the cape. Never mind. I take back. There is no quality problem there. But I just like how the mask goes down further on the original one and how pointy it is. In the cartoon, my favorite look for the Shredder mask is definitely when he has the actual line drawn down the center of the mask. Now, neither of these have that, and, you know, there's lots of points in the cartoon, or lots of episodes, where it doesn't have that line, but I like that line. I kind of feel like it might have been cool to see that line drawn on here, but man, that could have gotten dicey. You know, you never know how the quality control would be with such an important line, like if it'd be all squiggly on that center peak there down the front of his mask. So I kind of understand why they didn't do it, but kind of wish they would. They should have added some more cell shading or some kind of, like maybe put some white highlights or something like that on this. The torso, you know, there's not much really to say about it. I like the muscle definition more on this brand new one, or how it's cut. But the original one doesn't look that bad. It just looks a little too like undefined or something like that, like just a little wonky, but it still looks good. You know, the muscle looks pretty nice, even though he doesn't have like any kind of breaks in the abs right here. In general, though, both of them look pretty nice. Then you have the skirt right here. The original one has a much thinner skirt. This one has a wider skirt. I don't know. I would assume that matches. The wider one is probably how it appears in the cartoon, more so than the skinnier one. The skinnier one is probably just a remnant of the Mirage version of the Shredder. All right, so here is where, like, to me, the brand new one, like, jumps ahead of the original one. It's because the arms are just so scrawny looking. The muscle definition is good. It's just he has those scrawny Mirage Shredder arms. With this guy, I mean, he looks pumped. You know, like, his arms match the rest of his body, I think, better than the arms on this original Shredder. If you look at the armor here, right, you have these shoulder spikes. Now here, they, like, really went all out. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spikes on that, right? In the cartoon, Shredder always has 4 spikes on his shoulder pad. All right, there's just always 4 there. Although there are some differences, all right? You can see on the toy here that they're kind of split up by corner, I guess, or, you know, what would you want to call it? Quadrant? I don't know. Like, you got one on the top, one on the bottom, one on the left, one all the way on the right? Now, for most of the time in the series, that's pretty much how it is. Although there's lots of episodes, and it goes back and forth, there's lots of episodes in the earlier seasons where the bottom 3 spikes look like they're like one row across. You know, like they don't look like one's a little higher than the other one. They look almost like they are straight in a row. Moving down to the forearm armor, you can see that the brand new one has a much rounder shape to it. You know, there aren't any pieces sticking out or anything like that. The original one has like these extra bits down here sticking out on the sides. That's not really present in the cartoon. You know, it's just always like this toy right here in my right hand. The other thing to point out is the spikes. you always have 2 rows of spikes, and it's always 1, 2, and then the bottom row has 1, 2, 3. And the original one had that, although I would say for the majority of time, those spikes are kind of like on the bottom end of this armor piece. So they should be further down, like here. I think this is good that they're right in the middle. The original one has them like right at the top, which is just not correct. So even though this is in the middle, that's still, you know, pretty accurate to the show. And then, of course, you have, on the actual forearms, you have 2 metallic bands that go across, right? You got the big one that's right by the wrist, and then you have the smaller one up closer towards the elbow. Here, they just use the black wraps, like Mirage Shredder. The Shredder in the cartoon, you know, he holds these blades in his hand, and they actually do wrap around his hands. And if you look at the open palm hands, you can see that NECA did, in fact, wrap that metallic piece, or put a strap there that wraps all the way around the inside of his hand. So that's good. The original one did not have that. They probably just didn't, you know, think to put it there. It's fine. The other arm is just the same stuff. You know, you could pretty much mirror Shredder, and he's the same on both sides. Moving down, you have, he's got much bigger or thicker legs. The original ones look, you know, muscular. They're well defined, and they're sculpted well, and they have a lot of really nice creases down here on the bottom of the pants. It's just not how it appears in the show. You know, it appears more bulky, and down here you don't really have those creases down by the shin guards. The shin guards themselves, in the cartoon, there very much is this like hard edge that goes right down the middle of them. Not always, but the majority of the time. You know, obviously it's probably on the model sheet. It's supposed to be there. So they included it here, and those spikes are supposed to be on the outside of this shin guard here, which is exactly what they did. And you have 2 columns. The one on the outside has 3, and the one on the inside has 2. So the original one, just like the arm guards, they have the same number of spikes. It's just not, I don't think it's lined up the best. And the shape of it just looks different. And there's like all creases and stuff like that on the, like it almost looks all nicked up. The new one is much cleaner and sharper. In the cartoon, the shin guards are kept on with 4, I guess, metallic straps. That's what they did with the brand new action figure. On the original action figure, it looks just completely wrapped, you know, it's like just wrapped up like the Mirage Shredder. And those wraps continue down to the foot and also on the bottom of the foot. You know, he's got no sole or anything like that he's standing on. The cartoon Shredder, it looks almost like he has a boot bottom, you know, more so than the, I guess, martial arts wrappings that the Mirage Shredder has. And then you sort of have this one strap that goes over the middle of the foot, and you know it's kind of hard to see it because he always has black shoes, right? So, but it's, you can notice it when you look at them closer in the cartoon. There's not much else to really compare with these guys. You know, he has a very basic design. I kind of like the muscle definition more on the original one here on the back. It's just a little like lopsided. Like this one shoulder blade back here is up like higher than this one. This one is kind of undefined. And of course, he just has a very basic black belt. Both Shredders, in my opinion, are very good Shredders. I like both of them for different reasons, but this brand new Shredder is definitely the better one. You know, it's more accurate to the show, and he just looks like the Shredder I always wanted since I was a kid. And him and the Archie comic Shredder are now my 2 favorite Shredders of all time. Like, these are fantastic. I like them better than the Mirage Shredders. I still have to open up the Worms of Madness Shredder, but I don't know. They can't beat these guys for me just because I have so many awesome memories of reading about this Shredder and watching this Shredder in the cartoon. You know, NECA did a fantastic job with both of these guys. And look at, like, there are some differences here. I did mention in my Archie review that that they were very similar. I kind of like the upper torso a little better on the Archie one because of the way the pec right here goes up to the shoulder. Here it's kind of squeezed a little bit. I think it makes him look a little more powerful on the original one, or I'm sorry, on the Archie one. Kind of like the muscle definition a little more too, but the legs look to be about the same except for the shin guards and the shoes. The armor, the forearm armor is different, but it's still very similar. And like I said, both of them are great. When it comes to articulation, you basically have everything that you would expect from a NECA action figure. You have a ball-jointed head. Oh, you know what I really like? I don't know if you consider this part of articulation, but you can actually remove the brim of his helmet, right? And you can take the brim off of the extra head and put that on him. So that way he actually has the Eye of Sarnoth on his helmet. When I first saw this in the package and I saw this was connected to like the maskless face, all I could think was like, oh man, they really should have given you two heads, you know, masked and helmet, headed Shredder with the one with the Eye of Sarnoth and one regular. So I'm so glad that they made that removable. The shoulders have a swivel, but of course you're going to get stopped by that shoulder joint there. There's a hinge. There's a bicep swivel. He has new pinless elbows. That's new from the original Shredder, although, you know, Archie Shredder also had pinless elbows. So that must be a new thing NECA's trying to do. And these work pretty well. I don't know, even when you bend them, they don't look too weird when you use both elbow joints at the same time. Sometimes it looks, I don't know, rubbery or sausagey, but these actually look pretty good. There's actually a cut here, right in the forearm, so you can actually spin this around to move the armor, which is nice, because at first I didn't think you could do that. So it's like right here between the big strap and the little strap. Then the hand, of course, has a swivel and a hinge. Newly added for this cartoon Shredder is a ball joint in the upper torso, so you can move him all around. As I said before, the original one did not have any kind of articulation, and if there is something, it's underneath this overlay and you can barely move it. The hip swivels around right there, right above the belt. The original one, the belt is actually connected to this overlay, so that's all one piece. I'm going to have to get that now. But you can actually rotate it in here underneath the belt, above the pelvis. Shredder, of course, has the brand new, I keep saying brand new, but I mean, it's not brand new. It's the newer NECA hip ball joints, which are great. Plus there's that extra swivel above the thigh right up here. Then you have pinless double jointed knees, which also look pretty good. And, you know, his articulation is actually not bad. I didn't have any points that were like way too stiff where I felt like I was going to break it. They don't feel too loose. They might be a little bit loose, but not super loose. Okay. There is a boot cut right here, right above this strap right here. So you can move that around pretty good. And then the ankles, of course, have a hinge and ankle rockers. Now, something missing that the original cartoon Shredder had is he had articulated toes. Not that they're, I mean, I guess you could use them pretty good, but this cartoon Shredder does not have them. I don't think, do any of the cartoon action figures have them? I think Splinter has articulated toes, but pretty much almost everybody else doesn't. Maybe the foot soldiers. have him? Because aren't the foot soldiers, don't they have the same feet as this guy? But other than that, I think pretty much almost everybody has solid feet. Here you can see how these two Shredders scale with a lot of different characters from the Fred Wolf series. I tried to put them next to, I don't know, the people you would expect him to hang out with or have to deal with, except for little tiny Baxter Stockman here. But I mean, he's basically the same size as Fly Baxter here. Trying to figure out the scale of Shredder with everybody else was getting a little tricky, because sometimes, I don't know, unless you have the actual model sheet, which I don't have, you're trying to just look at side-by-side shots of the character next to other characters in the series. So there are times where Rocksteady, like the top of his head looks like it's like almost, I don't know, mid-pectoral, and Bebop would be like shoulder height. But I think what it's supposed to be, I think Bebop's head is supposed to be sort of like eye level. And then Rocksteady's head is supposed to be shoulder level. So this actually looks pretty good. You know, he looks pretty good next to them. Shredder's, the top of his head usually falls between this top slit here on Krang's chest and the, like below his chin. So that's actually lined up pretty well. You know, it looks as though it's the top of his head is around the top slit there. One thing you'll also see is like the, where his belt is will line up where Krang's belt is on his big fat baby body. So the turtles, right? The turtles are just a little bit smaller, I guess, than Rocksteady. It's, like I said, it's tough. Sometimes I feel like they look like they're almost the same height as Rocksteady. But yeah, I would assume that they're supposed to be a little shorter. So then the turtle head is actually mid-pec. So basically what we're seeing here too is this guy was way out of scale. You know, he doesn't line up appropriately with everybody else. He's not too bad. He's off, you know. The biggest problem, I guess, here is just April O'Neil still. April is just still too short. I don't have a lot of reference of April standing next to the Shredder, because most of the times when she's with the Shredder, she's either like, you know, tied up or, you know, in some kind of death trap or something like that. But I think from what I could see in the cartoon, she almost looks like she's as tall as him, but I'm sure she's probably supposed to be a little shorter than him. So April is just still off, you know. I get they like just kind of didn't they just kind of redesign the neck piece there? They should have built a whole brand new April body, because she's just not in scale with everybody else. So before I get to the accessories, I'm going to give you quite a information dump. I know it's been a while since I really went all out and gave you a lot of information about something from the cartoon. I think the last like really big video I made was the Turtle Van, and that was probably almost a year ago. So I'm going to do one right now for Shredder, all right? I'm going to tell you every time the Shredder unmasked, I'm going to discuss his disguises or suits that he wears in the series. I'm going to talk about his best fights, in my opinion. You know, not every single fight, but the ones that really stand out to me. And also during the best fights section, I'm also going to talk about like his most evil deeds that stand out to me. And no, it's not like a list of every single evil scheme he has, because that would be like I should probably do a whole video of just that, like every single scheme him and Krang come up with. These ones just, like I said, they stand out. And I'm also going to discuss Shredder's utter failures and ultimate embarrassments. And, you know, I left some out. You know, I didn't talk about every time he fell in the water, or because that happens every time. I didn't talk about every time he fails. But like I said, all of my favorite ones. I'm going to go through each subject and talk about them episode by episode. I'm sure this isn't 100% complete to anything, and I'm sure that there is probably some stuff that I didn't include here that's your favorite. So if you do have a favorite best fight or embarrassment, or I think I got all the disguises, but just let me know your favorite stuff about Shredder in the cartoon in the comments. Maybe favorite sayings or quotes. Let me know. So, the first time we see Shredder unmasked is in the very first episode, Turtle Tracks. While Splinter is telling April the origins of Hamato Yoshi, we see some examples of Oroku Saki being a pain in the ass. He's being a jerk, you know. Splinter was a Foot Clan teacher in the past. He was a teacher of the Warrior's Way of Enlightenment. And Saki was one of his students. And Saki tried to usurp him. You know, seeing this episode as a kid, I never knew that Peter Chung designed these characters, but he did. He actually posted about them on Instagram. But like, as soon as you know that Peter Chung did it, or designed these characters, like it makes total sense. I mean, and look at their feet here. They kind of look like they got Ninja Turtle feet. So things get ultimately worse for Yoshi when Saki knifes him in the back, or he sticks him to the wall with a knife. So he can't bow before a Foot Clan Master Sensei. When Yoshi pulls the knife out, he's mistaken for an assassin, and the Foot Clan throw him out, and Saki is able to rise the ranks of the Foot Clan and become the leader. Later on, in the same episode, Shredder watches the turtles from down below in the Technodrome. When he realizes that they're Hamato Yoshi's turtles, he takes off his mask, so we all know it's him. The next suit that we see the Shredder wear after seeing him in his human gi is this protective suit from Enter the Shredder. I kind of like this one. I wouldn't mind getting a toy of this just because it looks cool. I'd love to pose him holding the mutagen. I actually would also love like a mutagen canister that looks like this later on in the same episode. But what I think is funny about that protective suit is he still wears his mask under the hood of that protective suit. In Shredder and Splintered, we see Shredder unmask again as he cries like a baby. But I don't want to conquer this place. I want to conquer Earth. Messed that up. But you get it. He says it's similar to that, right? And he says that after the Technodrome is sucked into Dimension X. In Season 2, the episode Mean Machines. And also in the episode Case of the Killer Pizzas. And also in the episode Splinter No More. He wears a brown cloak. In the episode Curse of the Evil Eye, he dresses up like a Gordon's fisherman. And it also sometimes looks in this episode, when he doesn't have his helmet on, that his metal mask might be made out of cloth. Like, see how it wraps around his head there? I also have to mention that in the same episode, you can see him maskless when he welds the Eye of Sarnoth to his helmet. In Invasion of the Punk Frogs, Shredder uses a holographic projector to put on some civilian clothes so he can travel to Florida and retrieve a can of mutagen. Now, was it too hard for him to change clothes? Like, I guess he didn't have anything. Maybe all of his clothes are in the Technodrome in Dimension X at the moment. But my question is how does he travel to Florida and back in the same day? He doesn't use a portal to go to the Technodrome and then down to Florida. There's a dangerous ion storm, and he could end up in Dimension Z or something like that. Also, at this point in the season, I'm pretty sure Krang still won't give him any resources. So how did he get down there? And how did he get the Punk Frogs back up to New York City in the same day? Moving on to Season 3, in the episode The Old Switcheroo, Splinter and Shredder get pushed onto these platforms during a fight. After Rocksteady shoots the controls with a stun rifle, Shredder and Splinter switch bodies. When Splinter wakes up inside of Shredder's body, there's a few scenes where Splinter takes the mask off while he's thinking. I think that's how you're supposed to know he's actually a good guy, because you're like, oh, it's his human face. He's not that mean son of a gun with the metallic face covering. In Take Me to Your Leader, Shredder wears some winter gear, And I'm a big fan of that because I love winter stuff. I love snow episodes. So it's kind of funny seeing him in that gear. Look, I know I say lots of times I would buy stuff that NECA makes. I would definitely buy, and I don't want to give them any ideas because I'm already spending too much money on NECA products, but I would buy a Shredder and Krang in those winter costumes. I just think that they're really cool. In another Season 3 episode, this time Cowabunga Shredhead, Shredder becomes a different character. He gets Michelangelo's personality zapped into his brain. And he takes off his mask while he's eating some Vinny's pizza. Now, I'm going to talk about this when I go into accessories. So don't worry. There's going to be a lot more information about this whole episode. In Camera Bugged, Shredder tricks the Polarisoid into giving up his camera by pretending to be a hot dog vendor. Now, this one makes me kind of laugh because, like, who in their right mind would fall for this disguise? I guess an alien, right? In Shredderville, we get to see Shredder as a dangerous adolescent, and we also get to see him as a ruler of New York. And boy, Shredder sure cleans up nice, right? In Four Turtles and a Baby, Shredder disguises himself in a trench coat and fedora. And look at Rocksteady. I feel bad for Rocksteady. he must feel a little embarrassed with that diaper on. In Menace Maestro Please, Shredder disguises himself as the Phantom of the Floxy Theater. But as it turns out, there's actually a real Phantom in the theater. And then that Phantom turns out to be an alien. In Farewell Lotus Blossom, Shredder disguises himself as a ghost in order to trick Lotus into fighting the Turtles. He says that he's Chakahachi, the leader of the clan that Lotus Blossom descended from. She says that she has no clan, but Shredder's like, nuh-uh, your parents totally belong to the Chakahachi clan. And then she's like, oh, I gotta do whatever you say. He tells her that she has to get a special urn that the Turtles stole. We're jumping up ahead now, you know. In Season 6, there's an episode called Krangenstein Lives. And in that episode, Shredder walks out of a pneumatic module and immediately falls in a hole. What a schmuck. And the knock on his noggin is so severe, it gives him amnesia. And at first he questions why he wears a mask, so he takes it off. But then he puts it right back on, deciding that, it goes with the rest of his outfit, so why not? In Sword of Yurikawa, Shredder puts on some ninja gear so that he can steal the sword of Yurikawa, but it turns out he stole a phony. Earlier, Splinter stole the real one and replaced it with a phony, and then that phony was stolen by a loser named Lafayette Ladrone, and he replaced it with another phony. So Shredder stole the phony of a phony. In Turtles on the Orient Express, and now we're moving into Season 7, the vacation episodes, Shredder wears two disguises in this episode. First, he wears, like, Arabian wear, and then later on in the episode, he dresses up like a conductor. Now, I love that conductor outfit on Shredder. I think that's pretty hilarious, but even funnier than that is April O'Neil, Channel 6's #1 news reporter. She interviews him, and she doesn't recognize that it's him, even with those spiked arm guards that he wears. Like, come on, April, how stupid could you be? But then she sees these, two sets of sneakers underneath the sheet, and she recognizes that that's Bebop and Rocksteady. So she recognizes them by their footwear, but she doesn't recognize Shredder, by his stature or the armor that he's wearing. Like, come on, April, what's going on with your brain? Later on in Season 7, the vacation episodes, in the episode April Gets in Dutch, the Shredder wears a disguise when he tries to steal the Duchess diamond. But he still wears that mask, so, he's not really being as inconspicuous as I'm sure he was hoping for. Finally, in the proper Season 7 episode, The Legend of Koji, Shredder travels back in time to give his ancestor, he wants to get his ancestor to get some powerful artifacts, which will help him destroy Hamato Yoshi's clan. His ancestor is Oroku Sancho. Sancho is a arrogant fool, so Shredder takes Sancho's men to retrieve the artifacts without Sancho's blessing. He ties them up into a closet. And here you can see Shredder disguises himself in Sancho's armor. And that's all for unmaskings and disguises. Moving on, next up is Greatest Battles and Dirtiest Deeds. Now, to be fair, lots of battles and evil schemes in the show can be a little underwhelming, especially since the Shredder fails all the time. And there's lots of times where Shredder's just like sword fighting and it's kind of boring. Although I think I mentioned most of them here. But I wanted to point out the best ones, if you want to look them up. And I also wanted to point out or mention all the times the Shredder and Splinter fight. I feel like that's the most important Shredder rivalry. So, starting off with best fights, in Season 1, the episode Shredder and Splintered, Splinter fights the Shredder for access of the retromutagen ray generator. This thing will turn Splinter back into Hamato Yoshi, or it'll turn the turtles into little baby turtles that can easily be disposed of. The whole first season is kind of built around Splinter trying to turn back into a human and the turtles trying to do what they can to help him. So you really feel the weight of this battle, as Splinter fights to regain his manhood and Shredder fights just to be a jerk. He's just evil. As the fight scene begins, Shredder actually begins the fight with deception, right? Because first of all, the retromutagen ray generator isn't even in the room, right? He's just tricking Splinter into a battle. And then he, starts off with this very cool army of holographic Shredders. Which Shredder is the real Shredder? Splinter doesn't actually use his nose to figure it out. You would think that he would do that, be like, oh, I could smell you behind me. But no, he doesn't do anything like that. He just whacks a couple of them until he gets to the real Shredder. Now, I would, bet money that this is where Konami took inspiration for the multiple Shredder battle at the end of the original arcade game. So, despite attacking the wrong Shredder at first, Splinter manages to hit the real one, and then the real fight begins. At first, Shredder is unarmed, but as the scene cuts away up on the surface where the turtles are dealing with Krang, it cuts back to them, and Shredder now has a sword. The fight seems somewhat evenly matched, with Splinter slightly edging Shredder out. But then, Shredder gets in a quick hit, and that knocks Splinter off balance. After a short game of rat and louse, Splinter whacks the Shredder, stating that Shredder forgot his old lessons, and that gentle always turns away strong. As the fight progresses, Splinter breaks Shredder's sword, and then he charges him. As I said before, up on the surface, the turtles are fighting Krang, and when they get the upper hand on Krang, Krang wimps out, and he calls the Shredder for help. And that's when the Shredder captures Splinter in this force field and leaves the fight early. The first evil deed. In Season 2, the episode, The Incredible Shrinking Turtles. In this episode, Shredder almost beats the turtles to death with a crowbar. Has he been reading A Death in the Family? He's about ready to kill them. But then this actually leads to a really awesome fight between Splinter and the Shredder, because Splinter and April arrive in the turtle van. Splinter jumps out of the turtle van catapult, or the turtle launcher, and the fight begins. Shredder gets in the first blow, but then Splinter reciprocates. The battle leads to a struggle between the two mortal enemies on a conveyor belt that's heading towards a cheese wrapping machine. Donatello manages to turn off the machine. Splinter knocks Shredder off of the conveyor belt, and then Shredder runs away like a little bitch, right? He just wimps out. I guess I should mention, earlier in this episode, there also is a decent fight between the Turtles and Shredder, where Shredder kicks their butts. You know, he beats them pretty badly, and then he shrinks them down in size. Plus, I guess I should also mention that there is another really great evil deed in this episode where Shredder starts shrinking buildings. And this, you know, this always reminds me of like the Manhattan Project with those little tiny buildings on the cover. Or I guess it's in the storyline of the game too. But I just love that. I would love for NECA to put out like an aquarium filled with shrunken buildings. Another evil deed to mention during season 2 is in the episode Enter the Fly, where Shredder, first around, he roughs up a flower delivery guy like he's picking on some little wimp. But the plant he sent to April is actually a poisonous plant. And when April sniffs the flowers, she gets poisoned. So he tried to kill April in this episode. And that plant is called a Doku plant. In the season 2 finale, there's a decent fight between the Shredder and Splinter on like a bridge inside of the Technodrome. Yeah, it looks pretty much like Star Wars, but don't worry. We'll see another fight that's almost exactly like this in the season 3 finale. But this one is kind of cool. Splinter gets hit, and then the bridge breaks as the Technodrome shakes too much from digging itself down into the center of the earth. That's what happened at the end of the season 2 finale. It got stuck all the way down there in Lava Land. Moving on to season 3, there's a very short confrontation with Splinter in the episode Beneath These Streets. And I'll talk about this later on when I talk about the Medi-Laser, but basically Splinter is trying to attack Shredder, and Shredder shoots him with the Medi-Laser. In the episode Turtles on Trial, there's an amazing fight in a museum with the Turtles. Donatello drops a crocodile on the Shredder, and at one point Shredder uses a crossbow. I think that's pretty cool. But what I really love during this battle is when Leo attacks Shredder, Shredder blocks Leo's swords with his arm blades. You know, you don't really see that happen too often. I think there's like 2 times I noticed it throughout the series when I was compiling all this information. And it's just really cool. And instead of breaking Leo's swords, he actually uses those things to fling Leo's swords out of his hands. That whole scene in the museum is actually really fun. In the season 3 episode, The Ninja Sword of Nowhere, the Turtles buy a mysterious sword from a pawn shop. Turns out it's made out of an alien metal, and the Shredder also needs to get that sword. At one point, Shredder shoves Raph into a trash can, and he tries to clobber Leonardo with a pipe. For some reason, what's kind of funny is Leo actually ducks his head into his shell here, even though Shredder didn't try to whack him in the head. It's actually a pretty rare thing in the series for him to drop his head down like that, so you would think he would say something, but there is no joke. After Shredder gets the Sword of Nowhere, he tries to slice Leonardo, but instead he slices through our plane of existence. The Sword of Nowhere was actually made using a metal that was used to make alien spacecrafts that traveled through dimensions. That's why it has this ability to cut through time and space. Later on in the episode, Shredder pulls Splinter into limbo, and the two fight. Splinter does this move where he flips over Shredder and grabs him by the shoulders and tosses him. Splinter actually does this 2 other times in season 3. He might even do that more, but I noticed him doing it twice in the episode Beneath These Streets, where he actually does this to one of the Ninja Turtles. He flips over his head, grabs him by the shoulders, and then tosses him. And then later on in that same episode, he does it to either Bebop and Rocksteady. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I will point it out later on when I talk about the episode, because that episode features the Medi-Laser. Now, during the battle in Limbo, Splinter has the higher ground. So Shredder does the right thing, and he actually leaves Splinter for dead. He leaves that dimension. This episode is actually pretty good because it actually shows Shredder being somewhat competent until the guys use a giant trash magnet to capture him and then drop him down on his minions. In Blast from the Past, Splinter proves that he is the rightful leader of the Foot Clan by beating the Shredder using the deadly curly maneuver. It's a little embarrassing. I'll talk about that one again later. Another evil deed that stands out to me is in the season 3 episode, Michelangelo's birthday. And in that one, Shredder tries to destroy Michelangelo using the Flush-O-Matic. It's the first and only time you see it in the cartoon series. In the season 3 episode, Usagi Come Home, Shredder fights Stan Sakai's Usagi Yojimbo. Shredder's kidnapped Usagi's master, and the only way he'll return him is if Usagi kills the guys. When Usagi refuses, Shredder challenges him to a duel. He says if Usagi wins, he'll release his master, but if the Shredder wins, Usagi must kill the turtles. At first, they seem somewhat evenly matched. That seems to be a common thing here. But eventually, Usagi takes the lead. He tosses a carpet over the Shredder's head. But before his victory is made final, Bebop throws a watermelon onto his head. And then, again, Bebop magnetizes the sword that Usagi Yojimbo is wearing, and he can't get it, so Shredder wins the fight. Again, in Season 3, in the episode The Gribbix, Shredder fights Leonardo on top of a giant cliff in the sewers. I just think this looks amazing. You know, I love the shot composition. I love how dynamic it looks. And I just really love the design of the sewers in this episode. They're painted in a way that looks so, I don't know, it's not like, it just looks really appealing. I was going to say bubbly, but I don't think that's it. There's just something so appealing about the sewers. Like, I love them, and I think like I said, the shot composition is very dynamic. A little step up from some of the other backgrounds in other episodes. Although the animation in this episode is very much a mixed bag, some of it being pretty bad. In the Season 3 finale, the big blowout, there's yet again another Shredder versus Splinter fight. That's 3 finales in a row. And unfortunately, I think it's the last one between Shredder and Splinter in a finale. But at first, during this battle, Shredder has the upper hand, but of course it doesn't last. It kind of looks here like maybe Splinter was trying to do that flip move again, but instead of pulling it off, the two of them fall through a grate. And now, yet again, we have another Star Wars-looking battle on a catwalk, just like the Season 2 finale. This one makes Shredder look worse, though, than the other one, because here, just as he's about to kill Splinter, Mikey shows up, and he turns on this water valve, and he knocks Shredder down a chasm. See, the problem was Shredder was monologuing too much, you know? He wasn't paying attention to his surroundings. Now, this may be somewhat surprising, but I didn't find any evil deeds or exciting battles to talk about in Season 4. You know, obviously, the Shredder is still trying to do some evil things, but none of them really stood out to me as anything super cool. And even, like, the episode count, even though there's 40 episodes during Season 4, Shredder, I don't know, he's only in like 60% of them. Like, I was surprised at how many episodes didn't feature Shredder and the Technodrome crew. There's not even an exciting Season 4 finale with Shredder fighting the Ninja Turtles or Splinter. It's kind of a letdown. But in Season 5, we get an evil deed. In the episode Once Upon a Time Machine, Shredder goes to the future, and he puts his face on the Statue of Liberty. Man. And then he beats up the geriatric mutant Ninja Turtles. He breaks all of their weapons. But to be fair, he does that. I mean, that happens to the young turtles all the time, so it's not like it's anything special. In My Brother the Bad Guy, we have another evil deed because Shredder handcuffs his own brother, Lieutenant Kazuha Saki, to a giant magnet. And he knows full well that the magnet is pulling the Technodrome into our dimension, and it's going to pull it right there and crush his brother, but he still does it. You know, it's pretty messed up. In Mutagen Man, Shredder tricks Mutagen Man into stealing Bindex 3. And then, as a reward, Shredder disconnects his life-saving mutagen tubes and he leaves him for dead. Which, I love. I love how, like, nonchalant Shredder is. He's, like, joking about Mutagen Man dying. Like, that's super evil, dude. Very, very evil. In the Season 6 episode, Super Irma, Shredder has a brief battle with Raphael, and the most notable thing is Raph breaks Shredder's swords with his sai. Not too many times throughout the series do you see the turtles actually using their weapons effectively, but there you go. In the episode The Sword of Yurikawa, both Splinter and the Shredder want the sword of Yurikawa. The sword has the amazing power of transformation. It always changes, but always remains the same. But after Splinter acquires it, he gives it to the turtles, and of course the Shredder steals it from them. He manages to tie the turtles up, and then he transforms the sword into a chainsaw and tries to kill them. But unfortunately, I think it's the sword can't be used for evil deeds or something like that. Like, he's unable to actually carry out the plan. And no, he's not trying to chop the turtles into bits. He's actually trying to cut the rope so that they'll fall to their deaths, which is also a pretty horrible way to die. Maybe not as horrible as dismemberment, but still pretty bad. But Splinter regains control of the sword, and there's actually a short little fight between him and the Shredder. Splinter uses the sword to slice and dice a stun rifle. He also cuts up like a club or something like that. But I mean, that's about it. There's nothing really special to talk about during their battle. In the Season 7 vacation episode, Shredder's New Sword, Shredder uses Excalibur to fight Leonardo. And unfortunately, it's not as exciting as you'd hope. In Turtles on the Orient Express, there's a brief Shredder and Splinter battle on a train. Shredder gets knocked down into the water, and yes, I know I said I wasn't gonna talk about every time he gets thrown in the water, but I mean, they're fighting on a train. It's kind of cool, right? And then later on in the same episode, Shredder has a brief fight with Raphael, and then he has a second encounter with Splinter on the train. And again, this one's very brief. The Shredder's cape gets caught in some kind of hook or something. Is it one of those like mail things that grabs the mail off the train? I don't know. In the proper Season 7 episode, Night of the Dark Turtle, Shredder takes on Donatello a few times. In the first one, he actually throws Donatello into some machinery, and that machinery breaks Donatello's brain and turns him into the Dark Turtle. And let me say this again, I just love how the Shredder looks in this episode. He looks really cool, super menacing, and I love the highlights and shading on his metal. Later on in this episode, Donatello, as the Dark Turtle, attacks the Shredder. And this scene is actually pretty neat. I like he's acting like Batman, so I always like when people act like Batman. But he roughs the Shredder up a little bit, and he actually tries to kill him. No joke. He's about ready to drop him and kill him, but the other turtles show up, and they decide to save the Shredder. In Invasion of the Krangazoids, April and Leo get captured by Shredder and the Technodrome crew. Once the other guys rescue them, there's actually a pretty exciting sword fight between Leo and Shredder. It's very short, but I don't know. They're swiping at each other pretty quick. The moves look decent, and that doesn't last very long because Shredder, of course, runs away. In the Season 7 finale, Shredder Triumphant, there's two Shredder battles. The first is barely worth mentioning, but the second is pretty cool because, Shredder's got two swords during this fight. And at first, he's taking on all four turtles inside the Technodrome. He easily knocks them away from him. And then the fight moves to the streets with just Leonardo and Raphael continuing to fight them. And it's just a very cool, exciting fight, They're slicing each other, or trying to slice each other very quickly. It's not like some of the boring attacks that we've seen in some of the other episodes. The battle ends whenever Irma, of all people, shoots one of the swords out of the Shredder's hands with a stun rifle, because Irma kind of turns into a badass in the episode, and then Splinter knocks the other sword out of the Shredder's hands with his walking stick. At the end of this episode, the Technodrome is actually sent to Dimension X without the Shredder or Krang. This was actually made a really good series finale, but it's okay that they continued it with seasons 8, 9, and 10. But at the end of this, Krang and Shredder don't have all their technology, so they flee in a beat-up truck. Moving on to season 8, before Dreg appears, Shredder has some episodes there. But in the very first episode, Get Shredder, there's a tiny fight between Shredder and the guys. But the thing that's really worth mentioning here is Shredder finally pulls off something truly evil. He blows up the Channel 6 news building after the Turtles fail to rescue and deliver Krang in the time that the Shredder gave them. I think he told them a half hour and they were late by 1 minute. It took them 31 minutes. So, the Shredder doesn't bluff. He destroyed the Channel 6 news building. In the Season 8 episode, Cyber Turtles, and geez, I feel like I've overlooked this episode my entire adult life of owning the DVD because I did not remember this at all, but Shredder actually fights Casey Jones. I can't believe I forgot about this because it seems kind of cool. And what I find really surprising is Casey actually keeps a sword in his duffel bag. So there's a little bit of a sword fight between him and Shredder. And Shredder gains the upper hand until Leo and Mikey show up in those cyber suits that they have. Those gigantic cyber suits. In the Season 8 finale, Turtle Trek, there's 2 fights. The first is pretty boring. Like I said, you would think that would be somewhat exciting, but it's not. It's very slow. The only exciting thing is Leo almost gets killed by some giant gears at the end of it. But then the second fight is much more exciting. It's definitely much more something to talk about. This isn't like a hand-to-hand fight between the Shredder and the Turtles. In this scene, the Turtles are caught by some type of Dimension X plant. And that's when the Technodrome actually makes its appearance. I think for the first time. They're pretty shocked to see it in Dimension X. And I think it's like the big special end of the Season 8 finale. But the Technodrome arrives and it opens its doors. And out comes the Shredder riding a retro mutagen cannon. At first, the Turtles don't even think that this thing might turn them back to normal. But then actually, Shredder shoots the Turtles' friend Gargon with the retro mutagen cannon, and it turns him back to normal. See, throughout this episode, the Turtles actually befriended this guy, but really he was working for the Shredder the entire time. He looked like a monster, but once he gets demutated, he looks sort of like a nicer looking monster, nicer looking alien kind of guy. And as the Shredder is about to shoot the guys, Gargon actually gets defensive and he decides to help the Turtles. He jumps in and attacks the Shredder, knocks him over, so the Shredder isn't able to turn the guys back into baby turtles. This gives the Turtles time to board a flying ship, and they shoot the Shredder's retro mutagen cannon, destroying it. And then Leo and Mikey grab the Shredder and throw him into the Technodrome's septic tank, or at least in my opinion, that's what it looks like, because it's yellow. Finally, we're here. In Season 10, there's a 3-parter that includes The Power of 3, A Turtle in Time, and Turtles to the Second Power. In the first episode, The Power of 3, Dreg transports the Shredder and Krang to his diabolical Dreadnought in hopes that they'll team up with him and help him destroy the Turtles. But, Shredder and Krang aren't into that. They want to work for themselves. They don't work well with others. They don't accept the team up. So Shredder kicks over Dreg. He roughs up Mung. And Krang and Shredder head out on their own to fight the Turtles and kill them themselves. Shredder and Krang don't get very far, though, because Mung starts to chase them. What's kind of cool here, or funny, is Shredder and Krang actually jump into some random vehicle, and turns out it's April O'Neil's car. So Shredder forces April to drive away, but April actually pulls out her turtle comm to secretly call the guys. And this actually leads to one really exciting Shredder battle. So they actually get inside of a taxi, and the taxi drives side by side with April's vehicle. At first, Shredder is trying to shoot them as they board the top of April's car. And at first you're thinking, oh man, that's enough to be cool, right? But then Shredder actually uses his claws to claw through the roof of the car. He gets up on top, and then there's a little battle on top of the car. Gotta say, it's pretty exciting. The battle is actually stopped short, though, whenever Dreg transports everyone back to his Dreadnought. There is a little fight inside the Dreadnought. One cool thing to mention here is the guys actually throw both Krang and Shredder inside of the taxi cab, and then they use a stun rifle to hold down the pedal, which crashes the taxi, or like it sends the taxi right at Dreg. Dreg jumps out of the way in time, but it's just kind of cool. So at this point, Shredder agrees to help Dreg stop the turtles. But then, of course, Shredder double crosses Dreg. He tries to steal Dreg's power. But then, of course, Dreg double crosses the Shredder. And Dreg is able to tie up the Shredder and Krang. And he's able to hook them up to these machines, as well as the turtles, and drain their mental energy. Dreg wants to become the most powerful mutant in the universe. But don't worry for Shredder, because Shredder actually managed to escape with Krang. But I don't know. After that, like, it's just like a back and forth sort of thing. Like, I don't know, there's just not like another really cool Shredder battle throughout this 3-parter. You know, one cool thing is Dreg actually has the memory of Krang, so you kind of see Krang on his forehead. That's kind of neat. Shredder, I guess, does confront Dreg, but I don't know. There isn't really even a good send-off for Shredder and Krang at the end of this 3-parter, because in Turtles to the Second Power, like, Shredder and Krang sort of disappear from the last episode. You know, Dreg and his minions get transported off-world, but Shredder doesn't really do anything. He just kind of disappears. They're never like, oh, now Shredder's out there or anything like that. Like, he doesn't get transported with Dreg. And by the way, doesn't this transporter look a lot like the Mirage Transmat? That's basically it for Shredder. The Shredder battles and evil deeds throughout the series. Like I said, I'm sure there's lots of things that he does in every single episode. And if you have a favorite scheme from the Shredder, let me know in the comments. And now that we've talked about Shredder's best battles, now it's time to talk about his worst disappointments. These are the most embarrassing moments, in my opinion, that the Shredder has. I mean, sure, he has to fail in every single episode, but these ones really stick out to me, either because of Shredder's incompetence or because it made Shredder look like a total goofball. Some of these I laugh at. Some of these aren't so severe. Like the first one, like in A Thing About Rats, the 3rd episode, the Shredder just goofs up because he tries to destroy Mikey with a stun rifle. He gets angry and shoots at him and destroys the Mouser main control. In It Came From Beneath the Sewers, a little snot-nosed punk kid steps right on Shredder's foot. And you'd think that, like, Shredder was mortally wounded with how he's acting. What a wuss. In Case of the Killer Pizzas, he gets completely covered in tomato sauce and pizza toppings, plus one pizza to the face for good measure. In Enter the Fly, the Shredder ends up on a garbage barge. Must stink. He must stink. When's he taking a shower? He wears the same clothes every single day. Now we're moving on to season 3. In Turtles on Trial, Shredder gets crushed by a stuffed crocodile, kind of like Hook, which I think is kind of funny. In Attack of the 50-Foot Irma, the Exporon isotope is used to make Shredder grow to weird proportions at first, and once he finally does, get like correct proportions as a giant, he hits his head. And this only lasts briefly, but then he falls. So he can't win. In the old switcheroo, Bebop and Rocksteady drop a crate on his foot. And, that wouldn't be too bad, but April gets the whole thing on tape. So he's just the laughingstock to everybody who sees that. In The Fifth Turtle, Shredder escapes by jumping into a pneumatic module hole, and he rolls all the way down to the Technodrome, which is all the way down in the center of the Earth. Like, could you imagine how long that would actually take him? This next one isn't necessarily embarrassing. I guess it's not embarrassing at all, but I just wanted to point out because it makes me laugh every time I see it. In The Big Mac, Shredder calls Krang while he's in this hotel, and just look how posh the Shredder's trying to act. It's funny to me seeing him sit there talking like how you doing, Krang? In Ninja Sword to Nowhere, the pneumatic module crashes into a laundromat, and now look at him, he's covered in laundry. But even funnier, he tells Bebop and Rocksteady that that's the last time he's going to let them sit on his lap and steer. By the end of that same episode, he laughs at the Turtles for trying to use a giant magnet to remove the Sword to Nowhere from his possession. He says the sword is made out of an alien metal, and it won't work. But he's too stupid to realize that he's covered, head to toe in iron. So he gets sucked up in the magnet. And then when Bebop and Rocksteady tried to help him, they actually move the magnet over to the side, and then all this garbage comes up and crushes him. And then he gets dropped down on top of Bebop, Rocksteady, and some foot soldiers. So, he's just getting his ass kicked there. In Four Musketurtles, Shredder gets caught in Krang's special Krang-sized force field. And if that wasn't bad enough, right afterwards, Donatello throws his bow and trips him. And then Shredder has to be drugged into a module as it escapes. In Turtles Everywhere, a large turtle steps on Shredder's foot. And then later, another turtle bites his toe. So he takes a beating. His feet take a beating in that episode. In Cowabunga Shredhead, he thinks he's Mikey. So, that's just a little embarrassing for him. In Pizza by the Shred, he rides a cheapskate while carrying Bebop and Rocksteady on his back, which just looks silly. And then at the end of the episode, he goes for a pretty bad ride on the Neutrino Star Cruiser when Bebop and Rocksteady steal it from the Turtles. In Super Bebop and Mighty Rocksteady, he thinks he's a monkey, which I've said this before. I hate that trope in cartoons when people think they're monkeys or just little monkeys. And in Beware the Lotus, Lotus Blossom kicks the Shredder's butt. And that's not embarrassing. I'm not sexist. But it makes him look unworthy in front of Krang. That's no good. And then he gets thrown in some oil or some kind of black liquid, and then he's covered in feathers, which is, way worse than getting beat up by a girl. In Blast from the Past, Splinter beats the Shredder using the Curly maneuver, which, is basically Splinter using some slapstick maneuvers like the Three Stooges use. In Leatherhead, Shredder falls into some yucky mutagen-laced swamp water, and he reverts back to his toddler form, which, here's another trope that hate in cartoons. When people get turned to kids or little babies crying. I hate that in old cartoons. Always have, even when I was a little kid. In Usagi Come Home, a module door falls on his foot. In Making of Metalhead, Shredder gets covered in cement. And then, I guess they need to chisel him out, is what they say. They ask for Krang for a chisel. In Turtle Terminator, Irma steps on the Shredder's foot multiple times, and then she squirts some soy sauce on his head. He also gets a paint can stuck on his head in this episode, thanks to Donatello. In The Missing Map, Shredder gets sewer sludge plopped all over his face while he's trying to capture Zack's brother, Walt. In The Gribbix uses his telekinetic powers to violently spin Shredder around and around on a roundabout. And then he gets tossed into some ice cream. In Mr. Ogg Goes to Town, Mr. Ogg eats all of the Shredder's priceless antique porcelain vases. Now, this isn't necessarily embarrassing. This is just a low point for the Shredder. And I just wanted to talk about how, it's cool that Shredder has this neat-looking room inside the Technodrome. Now, the final Season 3 failure, and as you've just seen, Season 3 has not been kind to Shredhead, but in Bye Bye Fly, Baxter uses his Mutazu Ray to turn the Shredder into a fly. What a revolting development. As I mentioned during the battle section, Season 4 interestingly cuts down the Shredder episodes, so there's not as many things to talk about, but of course there are some. There are definitely some. In Turtles of the Jungle, Shredder gets crushed by Krang's big fat butt, and then later on in the episode, Leo trips him like a little bitch. And Shredder's mom demeans him in front of his friends. Yeah, that's pretty embarrassing. She pulls his helmet like it's his ear, and then she pinches right by his eye. Jeez. In Four Turtles and a Baby, the Neutrino Baby Tribble uses her telekinetic powers to float Shredder around the sewers. And then later on, the Shredder gets kicked in the shin by a woman at a toy store. And seriously, how does this hurt him? This is supposed to be armor to protect him, but people are just kicking it and hurting him. Women and children. How come no one cuts their foot on the spikes? They must be kicking the side of the shin guard where there's no spikes. But still, is it made out of aluminum? In Back to the Egg, a little girl dressed up like Little Bo Peep trips him. And then he falls into some artwork. In Son of Return of the Fly, Baxter punches the Shredder in the face. And, if I was a Shredder, I would find this highly emasculating. In Bebop and Rocksteady Conquer the Universe, Shredder gets shot with the Anxietron ray, and he turns into a scaredy cat. In Slash dumps he dumps tons and tons of garbage on the Shredder's head. Krang too. In the Dimension X story, Shredder gets pushed into the Technodrome's laundromatic. In The Foot Soldiers Are Revolting, Shredder gets bested by Alpha 1 and some foot soldiers, which, those are supposed to be his minions, and they're overcoming him. Now we're moving on to Season 5. In Muckman Messes Up, Shredder slips on some of Muckman's muck. He does get covered in some of this goopy stuff, too. In Landlord of the Flies, Shredder gets beamed by some baseballs, like he's Homer Simpson or something. And then, I guess Shredder's getting more competent because there are less episodes featuring the Shredder during Season 5, but now we're moving on to Season 6. Frankenstein lives. I went over this before when I was talking about him unmasking, but again, in this episode, he walks out of a module, he falls down a hole, and he forgets who he is. Later on in the episode, Vernon knocks him down some stairs, and it jogs his memory, and now he's back to being evil Shredder again. In Super Irma, Irma uses her powers to push the Shredder into a large flower pot. And then at the end of the episode, he falls into the Technodrome's garbage room. Moving on to season 7, in the vacation episode, Rust Never Sleeps, all of the Shredder's iron is immediately turned to rust. Now, he can't move, but I don't think this makes any sense. All those metal pieces on his body aren't wrapped around joints. Is he wearing iron long johns? What's going on here? In April Gets in Dutch, Shredder jumps out of a portal and he lands right in a fishnet. Maybe it wasn't so bad that Shredder got pushed in the laundromatic earlier because, man, he must need to be washed all the time. He's just always covered in filth and stinky things. So now we're up to the final embarrassing moments that I noticed, I guess. That is in the episode Night of the Rogues, another season 7 episode. In Night of the Rogues, thanks to Bebop and Rocksteady, Shredder ends up getting covered in tar. And this leads, of course, to him throwing Bebop and Rocksteady in a hole in the Technodrome, and he puts the Rogues together to fight the Turtles. He's had enough of Bebop and Rocksteady's crap. And that's basically it. Those are all the failures that I wanted to mention. If you have any moments that you want to mention that I didn't mention, please mention them in the comments. Now, finally, accessories. And first, we're going to talk about the most boring of all accessories, hands. Is anyone excited about talking about hands? No? Shredder here comes with 3 sets of hands, plus 1 extra special hand. He comes with a set of gripping hands. He also has a set of fists. And then he also has these very nice looking expressive or reaching hands. More like reaching hands, but I think they're very expressive. And I think out of all the hands, these might be my favorite, or I think they are the most well done out of all of them. They're all good hands overall. It's just the sculpting around the knuckles and everything on this hand. It's just expertly done. Very nice. And then the extra hand, you have this one that can grip smaller objects, like the graphics disc. Or you can have him hold the spoon that came with Burn while he's eating a bowl of hot turtle soup, as you'll see later on whenever I talk about the chef's hat. If I had one suggestion, that would be, I kind of wish that NECA had included one pointer finger. Just because Shredder points a lot, he's constantly yelling orders at people and pointing about something. But overall, I'm happy with the assortment of what we got here. Next up, we have the helmetless head. If I can get this head off. Jeez. All right, so this is a very good head sculpt. I like it. I think it looks a lot like Shredder in the series, and I'm going to give you some examples of that in a second. I just wanted to show a quick little turnaround. I think the expression is nice. He looks determined and serious. He doesn't necessarily look as evil or angry as they possibly could have made him, but I think it still works for the character. And while I have him out, I may as well show Hamato Yoshi next to him. So I think that this head sculpt looks a lot like Shredder Unmasked in the episode Curse of the Evil Eye. I think that's the closest one. They were probably looking at that one. But he also looks very similar in Invasion of the Punk Frogs. So overall, I think this is like a season 2 head. I think in season 1, he's a little too elongated and a little too Peter Chungy. And then in season 3, I think the heads are too generic, the faces. They don't necessarily look like Oroku Saki. And then in season 6, I think that face looks a little too muscular or chinny or something. I don't know. I mostly just think this is the season 2 head. They were probably specifically looking at Curse of the Evil Eye because of the Eye of Sarnoth being included in this box set. So next, we're going to talk about, if I can get this head off, the maskless helmet head. Come on. Jeez. These heads really have a tight grip on that neck ball, but this looks great. As you can see here, the human face right here is just the same exact face and expression as the helmetless head. So maybe they could have included an extra expression, but it's no big deal. I think it's still fine. You know, it still conveys what you want to have your Shredder convey if he's just staring at somebody with ill intent. So then the only thing really to talk about is the helmet here, right? This special helmet with these crystals. Don't know what these crystals are? Well, you're in luck because the first accessory that we're going to talk about is the Shredder head with the Eye of Sarnoth helmet. Now, I've talked about the Eye of Sarnoth before, but just in case you missed it, I'll explain as much as I can here again in this review. The Eye of Sarnoth first appeared in the Season 2 episode, The Incredible Shrinking Turtles, and it was the focus of a 4-episode story arc. The Eye is a powerful crystal that can transform matter into any form. The turtles want it to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, and Shredder, of course, wants it because he's got the wrong hands and he wants to use it to rule the world. As the Incredible Shrinking Turtles opens, the guys are training in the park, and Shredder is creepily watching them from behind a bush. Everything is business as usual until a spaceship enters our atmosphere and explodes above the city. The guys are able to briefly save the alien pilot after he falls into the water, but before he dies, he tells them that they must find the Eye of Sarnoth. That when his ship exploded, the eye broke into 3 fragments. With these 3 fragments in their possession, they can have power undreamed of in our world. Which is why they can't let the Shredder have it, because he's going to do some bad shit with it, right? So I never understood how the eye was a part of this ship, but one viewer told me in one of the past reviews when I was talking about it, that they like to imagine that the fragments are the fingernails on the ship, right? Because the ship looks like it's a hand grabbing a pod. So if you imagine that those little tiny blue spots there are the fragments, you know, makes perfect sense to me. I think that's a great idea. I did kind of wonder, though, why no ship pieces were found along with the fragments. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, all right, well, I guess that makes sense, right? Because, you know, maybe the alien created the ship out of pieces of garbage, and then they reverted back to pieces of garbage after he lost control of the eye. Because later on you'll see in Curse of the Evil Eye, once the possessor of the fragment loses possession, the stuff will revert back to what it used to be. So, the alien dies, like I said he was going to, but before he does, he gives the guys a crystal converger, which they can use to track down the fragments. Shredder doesn't need any of that at the moment, though, because at first, he just follows the guys. The first fragment is found in some garbage at a shipyard. There's actually a pretty cool sequence here of the guys and the Shredder fighting over who gets the fragment. But in the end, the Shredder gains control, and he uses it to shrink the turtles. This again leads to more exciting things as the turtles start to live out Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I especially love when they're in the sewers and they're riding on the soap, and then like the snake tries to get them. I don't know. It's just fun stuff that was neat to see in cartoons, especially when you were a kid. While they're distracted, Shredder actually starts shrinking buildings, and he starts to collect them. And I would absolutely love for NECA to include some kind of aquarium in the future, or whatever this glass case is, and have it filled with shrunken buildings. You know, that would be perfect to have in wherever you keep your Shredder action figure. It reminds me of like the Hyperstone heist, and it just seems so typical Shredder for him to do something so maniacal or devious, you know, as to like shrink little tiny buildings and then hold them for power or for ransom. So by the end of the episode, Baxter and Shredder capture the tiny turtles, and it looks like, time's almost up for them until April and Splinter crash the party in the turtle van, and April gets her hands on the fragment, and she's able to grow the guys back to normal size. However, it's still not a happy ending because the Shredder still manages to get away with the fragment, right? So that's Shredder 1, Turtles, Zip. In the very next episode, it came from beneath the sewers. The guys continue to look for the fragments, although they're not having any luck. And the Shredder has to find the same fragment from the previous episode because sometime off screen and in between episodes, major moron Baxter Stockman accidentally tossed it out or misplaced it somewhere. What an idiot. Surprisingly, Krang actually decides to help the Shredder find it. He uses his computers to locate where it's at. He could have just did this for all 3 fragments, but this is the only time Krang helps the Shredder do that. So both the Turtles and Shredder track the fragment down to a carnival. I like to think that maybe, while eating some funnel cake, Baxter dropped the fragment in some corner here as he was hanging out by himself without anybody because he's a loser. So even though the future of the world depends on the Turtles finding the crystal, they feel it's more important to humor the owner of the carnival into thinking they're some performers he hired. So they go perform for everybody. Why would you even do that? You just tell him look, buddy, we quit. We're not doing it. Now leave us alone because we want to go eat some funnel cake. I mean, while they were doing that, the Shredder roughed up some kids and stole the crystal fragment, and now he got away with it. Back at the Shredder's lair, Baxter performs some tasks on the crystal. He says it has a most unusual infrastructure. When the crystal falls out of his, inspector rays, I'm going to call them, the crystal comes in contact with some spores on the Shredder's boot. These spores got on his boot when he went to Dimension X earlier to talk to Krang. This interaction causes the spores to mutate and grow. This creates a giant mutant plant that grows in the sewers, and it attacks the turtles. It attacks them in their home. That's pretty much all that can be said about the Eye in this episode. The turtles, they never retrieve it from the Shredder. I mean, the episode ends with him still having it, so, still Shredder 1, Turtle Zip. I guess just to mention it, the Shredder also kidnaps April, and he has the turtles come to save her. It's a trap, right? Why doesn't he just use the crystal to shrink them a second time and shrink April and just step on all of them? He could have did it, but for whatever reason, the writer just didn't think about it. Like the back of the box said about the turning off the gravity, repeat the same plan. Just do it better. In the episode The Mean Machines, the Turtles and Shredder once again track the crystal to the same place at the same time. This time, it's a dumpster. Like I said, this thing fell where there was some garbage around, so nobody noticed it. The Shredder didn't even have a tracker or Krang to help him find this one. This one, he actually had Baxter figure out the trajectory of where the piece landed, which is kind of funny because, Baxter, he wasn't in the park. He didn't see this spaceship blow up. Baxter tells the Shredder that this fragment will give him unlimited power when it's hooked up to a computer. So Baxter hooks up the fragment to Omnis. That's Omnipotent, Multiprocessing, Nexus, Subuniversal Sentience. And Omnis is a thinking machine, artificial intelligence. He's the maker of Street Fighter II, if it was in the 1950s YouTube videos. Omnis tells the Shredder if he's hooked up to a power source, he can control every machine in the city. And as you already know, Omnis takes control of everything in the city, right? That's basically the point of this episode. He takes control of construction trucks, the turtle van, everybody's Atari. So this episode gets pretty exciting with the Ninja Turtles fighting machines. This is a stereotypical plot that's been in many cartoons before this. The Turtles have to fight Dustbusters and Z-Bots, but eventually they reach the Shredder and Omnis and Baxter. The Turtles are able to beat Omnis when Leo cuts off his power supply and April unplugs him. No more Omnis after that. That's all good, but what they don't explain is how did Shredder and Baxter retrieve the Sarnoth fragment, before they escaped? They just magically have it in the next episode. They didn't run over and grab it or anything like that. They just booked as soon as the Ninja Turtles turn off the Omnis. In the next episode, Curse of the Evil Eye, Baxter and the Shredder find the last fragment in the river this time. And I'm sure it was probably sitting alongside a lot of other garbage, even though it was inside of a fish, all right? I'm sure that fish was hanging out by some garbage. While this is happening, the Turtles are actually continuing to look for the eye fragments with their Sarnothometer. It's weird how he pronounces that, Sarnothometer. But of course, they're too late, and Shredder makes off with the last piece of the eye. Now, Shredder welds the 3 pieces together, and then he welds them onto his helmet. Shredder says he'll be able to control its awesome abilities with sheer thought, having that right on his forehead, and use it to finally rid himself of the Turtles forever. Now, as he's finishing, Baxter leads the Turtles to him, all right? Baxter went out for some food, and he fought a little with the Ninja Turtles, but the Turtles still followed him back to Shredder's lair. It doesn't really make a difference, though, because Shredder isn't too upset. The Turtles are there, and now he can use his new bedazzled helmet to try to destroy them. He says the eye has the power to transmute matter, so he can transform any substance into any form he wishes. First thing he does is he brings a Chinese food mascot to life. All right, it's a cool looking dragon. And then he turns Leo's weapons into ice cream cones. A little later, he also turns Raph's sai into some flowers. Why are you being all cutesy about it, Shredder? Turn Leo's swords into snakes, venomous snakes, or turn, the sai into, a pinless grenade that's about to explode. Do you want to kill the Turtles or not? The effects of the eye aren't permanent, however, because as soon as Donatello knocks Shredder's helmet off of his head, the dragon disappears. At that point, the episode gets a little embarrassing for the Shredder, because he runs away like a wuss, and an even bigger wuss named Blodgett steals his helmet. Now he's helmetless, and some other nerd is rocking his cool helmet. How many times can I say helmet? So Blodgett takes the helmet back to his home, and he learns that he can turn junk into stuff he really wants. Blodgett, of course, starts to get greedy, and he tries to turn his gold wristwatch into piles and piles of gold, but the Eye of Sarnoth doesn't work, because later you find out the eye has no effect on gold. Blodgett, if you were hard up for money, all you had to do was take that gold watch to a pawn shop or something like that. You could take it to one of those we buy gold places, and maybe they'll give you some cash for it. At this point, Baxter tracks down Blodgett at his home, and he uses this cool gun that shoots out hands and feet. I've talked about this before, where I kind of feel like Konami was inspired by this thing to create the weapons that Baxter uses in Turtles in Time. He also says, one of the funniest lines in the episode, when Blodgett's like, "Why doesn't it work on gold?" Baxter responds, "That's because you're an idiot." And I don't know, just how he delivers it is hilarious. Pat Fraley did a great job as Baxter Stockman. I guess I should have mentioned also that Baxter was able to track him down because during the battle of the Turtles versus the Shredder a little bit ago, they dropped the Sarnothometer. So Baxter stole that, fixed it, and then used it to find the eye at Blodgett's apartment. So when Baxter steals the helmet with the Eye of Sarnoth on it, he again leaves the Sarnothometer at Blodgett's house, and Blodgett uses the Sarnothometer to track it down during the next battle. As Baxter leaves Blodgett's apartment, he exclaims that he's going to make the world pay for not recognizing his genius. First thing he does is he turns this old abandoned building into a Taj Mahal. The turtles just so happen to be in the neighborhood, so they confront him, of course. Now, a cool thing here is Baxter turns this billboard into the cement monster that appeared in Turtles in Time, the arcade version. That was the other reason why I thought that they were inspired by the gun that shot out the hands and feet for Turtles in Time, because obviously Konami was watching this episode, and they used that cement monster there. This is actually a pretty great fight. I've mentioned this before. It's like the Turtles versus Clayface, a giant Clayface. I would love for NECA to make a cement monster. That'd be great. Just as Baxter is about to defeat the Turtles and make them admit defeat, the Shredder actually shows up, helmetless. And now the cement monster turns his attention over to the Shredder. And then Baxter creates an electricity monster to fight the Ninja Turtles. This electricity monster actually showed up in a later episode too. So, Shredder is able to get past the cement blob monster, and he attacks Baxter. Baxter then tries to turn the golden minaret on top of the Taj Mahal into another monster, but it doesn't work because I guess here's where it's revealed that the eye doesn't work on gold. But, this doesn't make any sense to me, right? How did Baxter make this golden minaret on top of there? So can the eye make gold, but after it makes it, it can't make it into something else? Like, how could he create it to begin with? It doesn't matter, though, because Shredder gains control of the helmets, and all of Baxter's monsters fade away, plus the giant Taj Mahal. Next, Shredder turns his attention to the Turtles, and he traps them in a bubble. Afterwards, Shredder leaves the Turtles for dead as he flies away on a magic carpet to destroy the New York City Interstate Bridge, the first step in world domination. The bubble starts to shrink and crush the Turtles, but don't worry, April and Splinter show up to save them. And then, of course, because April wasn't in danger at all, April is almost crushed by a collapsing wall, but luckily, Blodgett shows up to save her. So now she's being saved by nerds. So Blodgett tells the guys that the eye has no effect on gold. It's a good thing he does, because April has her friend, the curator of the Museum of National History, lend the guys some golden Roman shields. Now, all while this is happening, it sure seems like the Shredder is taking his sweet-ass time, because, the guys have enough time to get their shields. They have enough time to fill up the turtle blimp. The Shredder spends some time creating rock monsters, but, as we've seen before, that only takes like a second to make them appear. But he hasn't even, begun to dismantle the bridge. What were you doing, dude? You could have taken care of that, no problem. So, how do the guys stop these giant rock monsters? Well, they drop their inflated blimp on their heads while diving the glider at the Shredder. Could you imagine all the time they spent blowing this thing up, and then Raph just throws a sigh in it to deflate it? The Shredder tries to use his Sarnoth beams, but the golden shields block them. And once again, the Ninja Turtles knock the helmet off of the Shredder's head, but it's still in his possession. At that point, his helmet comes in contact with the Sarnothometer. This is bad because Donnie explains that the Sarnothometer was designed to destroy the eye with a massive explosion. Seems kind of dangerous for Donnie to program this thing to do that. So, like I said, the Sarnothometer and the evil eye came into contact, and at this point, Shredder throws both of them into the river, and they explode. And we never see the Eye of Sarnoth in the cartoon again. But in the comic books, the Archie comic books, the actual alien creature, Sarnoth, comes to Earth looking for his eyes. There isn't much left to say about the helmet. It just looks like the regular helmet with the Eye of Sarnoth fragments right here, dead center, above his eyes. I mentioned this before, but I'm so happy that NECA figured out a way to make it possible for us to mix and match our Shredder heads with any way we want to display him. I think it does, even though he doesn't really appear with the Eye of Sarnoth, I think it kind of does make him look a little cooler. Although, I don't know, I probably won't keep it on him all the time. I'll just have regular Shredder. But one thing I do want to say is, if you look at the fragments, they're right here above the middle of his eyes. But I don't know if it's the where the face is located on this helmet. But the fragments are not dead center here. They are a little bit over to the side. So that's kind of a bummer. But like I said, I think it's so cool that you can do that. And here's a shot of the Shredder's face with the Eye of Sarnoth fragments. I guess they don't really have any black ink lines around them either. They're just colored blue. And here is the action figure up close. Up next, we're going to talk about the Medi-Laser. The Medi-Laser appeared in the Season 3 opener, Beneath These Streets. Now, at this point in the show, the Technodrome, Krang, the Shredder, and all the Technodrome crew are stuck in the Earth's core. It actually made its way down here during the Season 2 finale, Return of the Technodrome. On the way down, many of its electronic components were damaged, and it lost most of its power. Most urgently, the protein silicon brain of the main computer has an owie. Yeah, that's what Krang says. He says it has an owie, a boo-boo. Very, very mature, buddy. Very mature. So Krang tells the Shredder that the only way they can fix the protein silicon brain is with a device on the surface of Earth. And of course, it's in New York City. Now, this is the first time we ever see the Mutant module, or the pneumatic module, as it's called in the show. I love the tubes and everything like that. You would have thought that this would have been included since the beginning of the show, but no, it first appears in this episode. So, Shredder, Bebop, and Rocksteady have to travel to the surface of the Earth to try to find this healing device. And what is this healing device? Well, it's the Medi-Laser, of course. The Medi-Laser is the most advanced instrument known to man for healing. A prototype is being shown at a press conference where April is reporting right now. Surprisingly, Krang didn't see this news report first. Usually he gets all of his best schemes after watching April. Probably because she's like, Professor, this new nuclear device will turn space monkeys into real monkeys. But it's been said, if evildoers get their hands on it, they could use it to wipe out the entire island of Manhattan. Aren't you worried that somebody might steal it? Somebody who looks like a giant brain, wink wink at the camera? But no, Krang just knows about it somehow. Maybe she teased it earlier in the day and we just didn't see it. I don't know. I also want to point out that this building where the press conference is taking place is called Metro Hospital. And I just wanted to point it out because it's a very cool looking building. I like the way that thing looks. So, the Shredder, Bebop, and Rocksteady burst in, they steal the Medi-Laser, and April tries to call the guys. The only bad thing is the guys have decided to disobey Splinter this night, and, they don't want to work. They're actually off watching movies. They're watching Kung Fu Commandos versus Chainsaw Cheerleaders. To be fair, I'd skip stopping the Shredder so I could watch that movie too. It looks pretty fantastic. Although I can't tell if they intentionally made the cheerleaders look a little manly, or if maybe they're it's a joke. Maybe it's stuntmen in cheerleader costumes. Because if you look at them, none of them have the usual female lips or anything like that. Now, after the movie, you'd think the guys would, check their messages, but no, they don't. They decide to continue to blow off Splinter in April by going to get some pizza at the pizza place next door. Now, is this Vinny's or is it just bakery pizza? April reaches out to Splinter this time, and the two of them team up to find the Technodrome thieves. It doesn't take them long. Splinter is able to find them with his heightened senses. He smells hospital disinfectant. Plus, there's an ambulance double parked on the street. Now, the funny thing here is, April called Splinter after the robbery, but she must not have told him that, she indeed saw the Shredder or anything like that, because when he's standing there, he says, just as I feared, Shredder is alive and back on Earth. We must find him and stop him. Yeah, April told you she saw him. Way to rat-splain, dude. So, Splinter goes in alone to confront the Shredder, but he's easily knocked down with one blast from the Medi-Laser. Shredder says reversing the polarity of the beam makes it deadly. Do you ever sometimes wonder if the writers of these episodes actually knew anything about science, except for a couple keywords like polarity? We'll change the polarity. Molecular. Infrastructure. Yeah, that'll work. I can't complain. I don't know anything about science. So, just before Splinter passes out, he throws his walking stick at the Medi-Laser, and it knocks off this tiny little thing here. This is the directional control device, and turns out it's very important, all right? Because without it, the Medi-Laser can't be controlled or aimed. It just fires violently all over the place. Shredder takes it down to the Technodrome so Crane can use it on the protein silicon brain of the central computer, and he can't do it. Now look at this thing, though. What a creepy, weird design. That looks so cool. It makes you wonder if, the Technodrome is some kind of living biomechanical entity. Is that giant eye on top of the Technodrome an actual eye? So, of course, the Shredder, Bebop and Rocksteady have to go back to the surface to find the directional control module. On the turtle side of things, the guys return home after a night of partying, and they find April taking care of Splinter. Dawn says Splinter's in a coma, and the Medi-Laser must have short-circuited his brain functions. The only thing that'll save him is a blast from the Medi-Laser using the reverse frequency. Now, there's a couple funny things here I'd like to point out, right? The first thing I want to talk about is there's one shot here where the guys have just freakishly big heads. It's why are their heads so big? The other funny thing is this episode takes place like a little bit before they stopped giving the Ninja Turtles teeth. There's only a few episodes, I think, in season 3 where they continue to have teeth, but after that, they don't ever have teeth. I don't think they're supposed to have teeth. They'll color out the teeth in future episodes. But a lot of these shots, it looks like when they were trying to draw the teeth in, they just never drew the teeth in the middle. Maybe they thought it looked a little too weird underneath that big nose. So it just looks like a lot of them are missing their front 2 teeth. They also repeat some stuff here, right? They repeat some, basic shot setup. I'm not sure if it's the exact same scenes, but they repeat some of the same stuff where they return home after partying. Then they go out to try to find Shredder. They confront some guy who they think looks like Shredder. When they return back to the sewers to tell April that they couldn't find the Shredder, they sort of use the same animation stuff. So after going out and manhandling some random guy, they go back to the sewers, and finally, I guess an hour later, since they were first talking to April, April shows the guys that she has that little thing, the directional control module. She found it on the ground next to Splinter. Donatello immediately knows what it is, and he knows that the Shredder will have to come back to the surface to find it. And as I said before, Shredder did indeed return to the surface so he could find it. Now, this is funny too, because they use the exact same animation sequence of Shredder and Bebop and Rocksteady coming out of the module. Shredder and Bebop and Rocksteady look around the room, but they can't find the directional control module. Shredder comes to the conclusion that, well, Splinter is gone, so the Turtles had to have been here. They probably took the module too, right? So what he does is he sends out Bebop and Rocksteady to the park to cause some mindless destruction to lure out the Turtles. It kind of reminds me of Secret of the Ooze a little bit, when Toka and Razar are sent to the city to cause some damage. This episode actually has some really cool things going on here, because as the Turtles head off to fight Bebop and Rocksteady, first Raph is watching them from the blimp, right? So Raph is flying in the blimp high above the city. He's got those cool goggles. And in the meantime, Don, Mikey, and Leo are riding cheapskates. So, that's cool. You got a few different toys in this episode. Raph even drops a sneezing powder bomb on the two menacing mutants. This is like I said, this is actually a pretty fun fight, but Bebop and Rocksteady retreat, because the whole purpose of this was to get out the Ninja Turtles so that Shredder and the bad guys could follow them back to their lair where they could steal the directional control module. When they get to their home, the Shredder plans on throwing a gas grenade to stop them. So gas grenades, sneezing powders. Where's the action, guys? This is all kid stuff. On the way home, Leo catches Shredder's reflection in his swords, and he calls the Shredder out. At this point, the Shredder tosses his gas grenade, his all-powerful gas grenade, and Donatello hits it right back at him and knocks it down this hole. And I gotta say, even though I didn't think there was a lot of action to be had with the gas grenade, I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get to see the gas explode out of the gas grenade. The only gas or steam we see in this scene is when the Shredder, breaks this pipe here. So Shredder uses the distraction of the steam to steal the module, but in the meantime, the guys gain control of the Medi-Laser. Leo asks Don if he can create a substitute directional control module, but unfortunately he can't. Could you imagine if Donnie could? Krang couldn't do it down in the Technodrome, but Donatello could. What does that say about Krang? Krang, who created the foot soldiers and probably built the Technodrome. On Shredder's side of things, Shredder has to call up Krang and beg for him to send some foot soldiers. Krang only sends 2 because, he just won't help the Shredder. But here's where something amazing happens, all right? Because after these 2 foot soldiers come, a random newspaper lands on Bebop's head, right? It just comes out of a pipe and lands on his head. And what's the headline? The headline is, "New Medi-Laser built." Seriously? Way back when the Shredder stole the original prototype in the beginning of the episode, the scientists at the demonstration became completely distraught and cried, "They've stolen the Medi-Laser prototype. It's the only one in the world." Plus, this whole episode takes place in one night. The scientists had enough time to build a new Medi-Laser, contact the newspaper publisher. The newspaper people had to write this article, print the paper. They had to hand it out to people, and then someone, discarded it in the sewer drain and finally land on Bebop's head. All this happened within a few hours. It seems like this episode takes place at 8 to 11 o'clock at night. It was pitch black out. The Ninja Turtles were watching a movie marathon. How does this make any sense? So the Shredder decides to go steal the new one, of course. The new one that's not being guarded by anyone, even after the first one was stolen. What kind of morons are working at Metro Hospital? Luckily, at the same time, down in the sewers, Donatello and the other Ninja Turtles see a news report where they're discussing how a new Medi-Laser was built at Metro Hospital, so they head there. But as I said, Shredder gets there before them, and he already stole the new Medi-Laser. When the Turtles finally get there, they chase the villains into the sewers, and an epic battle takes place. This is actually pretty exciting, Foot soldiers are decimated, weapons are sliced in half, pants are dropped. Don actually gets 2 nice hits on Bebop. He hits him in the stomach with his bow, and then he gives him a nice kick to the upper body. During the climax, Leo reflects blasts from the Medi-Laser back at the Shredder. It hits some type of reservoir or something, like some kind of big water tank, and that, of course, explodes gallons and gallons of water, and all that water washes the Shredder away. But don't worry, because the Ninja Turtles are able to get their hands on the brand new Medi-Laser. So, now finally, the guys have control of a complete Medi-Laser, and they use it to heal Splinter. I like how Donnie's like, "I set it on healing frequency," as he pulls this large lever. Look, did the professors or scientists design this thing to switch between healing and like maiming or something like that. Like why would they give people the option to turn it on to murder frequency? I kind of thought that maybe reversing the polarity just gave you like a jolt or something like that. I didn't realize it was being turned from healing to something much worse. So this episode ends with the Shredder down in the Technodrome shutting Krang up with a large piece of sheet metal, which is pretty funny. I like that. You know, this episode is a fun episode. I don't think I've ever really talked about it before on the channel. I'd kind of put it in the middle of the season 3 episodes. You know, it's not bad. It's not like the greatest episode, but it's still fun enough. You know, I think it's rather enjoyable. Here's NECA's Medi-Laser. It actually fits really nice in his right gripping hand. Although, you know, if you're trying to aim it at somebody, you might have a little bit of trouble because it's like, where are you going to put the other gripping hand? There's too much crap over on the other side for him to grip. Maybe you could put it underneath the this little tube down here. You know, that probably works fine. In the cartoon, I think this shot right here looks closest to the Medi-Laser. Sure, this tube right here is thinner on the toy, and it's missing some things like screws up here, and also screws down here next to this the side of this red dial plate. Sure, some of the proportions are off, but the barrel or the nozzle looks very similar, and in general, it just kind of looks like this. You know, it's as close as any reference I think gets to being this action figure version or this toy version. You know, in some of these shots, the Medi-Laser looks way off. Like in this shot right here where Shredder's carrying the second stolen Medi-Laser, the proportions are just very different. And sometimes that barrel looks completely different. Like right here where it just seems kind of open. If you look at this shot where Krang's holding it, and a few others, you know, the barrel's different again. And I think this device is supposed to be the same on both sides. Like if you looked on the left side or the right side, it's exactly the same. It's just mirrored. Which is what NECA almost did, but for some reason they left out the red dial on this side. Who knows why? In this shot where the scientist is holding it, it's very similar, but again, there's just slight proportion changes, you know, and some bits are just off. You know, I think that one where it's stuck up against the wall, thanks to Raph's Sai, I think that's the best looking one. Now, one thing you may have noticed in all of these shots, and you're probably surprised that I didn't mention it yet, is there's supposed to be a switch on top of the Medi-Laser. And this switch reverses the polarity of the beam. There hasn't been a single shot that I've seen where it wasn't there. You know, it's always supposed to be there, even the one where it's stuck up against the wall. There's even a close-up of the switch whenever Donatello switches the polarity to save Splinter's life at the end of the episode. You know, I'm surprised that NECA didn't include that. It almost looks like there's a little divot or something right here. But I don't think they ever intended to put anything there, you know? You would think that maybe they would have sculpted some kind of nub at least, even if it didn't turn. You would think that there'd be some kind of something here to represent that switch. Down here is the directional control device, right in the handle. Let's see if I can get it out. You know, every time I would like move this thing around, it would fall out. Now I'm trying to like get it out. There we go. It's very small, and I would be very careful with this thing. You know, I think if I were to display my guy holding the Medi-Laser, I probably would still put the directional control device in like my box of accessories and not even have him hold it, because I would think, you know, moving him sometime, it might fall out of his hand or out of the Medi-Laser, and then you're probably going to lose it. And I'm not going to do that. The next accessory that we got to talk about is Shredder's chef's hat. Now, ever since NECA unveiled this thing, I just assumed that it was in Pizza by the Shred. I saw it and I thought, oh, that's got to be in Pizza by the Shred. I kind of remember that, right? you know, Shredder's running his own pizza place. He's running weird pizza. He probably has the hat on in that episode. But no, I took a look at my reference and it wasn't there. However, Bebop and Rocksteady do wear chef's hats in that episode, so we'll see if this thing could fit on their heads too. Otherwise, expect to get them in the next NECA accessory set. But I had to do a little bit of digging, but it wasn't that bad. I actually found it in the Season 3 episode, Take Me to Your Leader. And because of its appearance in that episode, I kind of feel like this is the most obscure item in the whole package here, because it's only a one shot. And Shredder only wears it during a dream sequence that Leonardo is having. As Take Me to Your Leader opens, Shredder is in the Technodrome, boasting about how all of Earth's bakeries will soon be wiped out, and he'll have all of the cheese danishes in the Technodrome for himself. Fat bastard. Cheese danishes are for everybody to enjoy, not just you, Shredder. So that's when the guys explode through the wall, and they're there to thwart Shredder's plan. However, things don't go according to plan, because as I said, this turns out to be Leonardo's dream, and Leonardo cannot successfully lead the Turtles. He's having trouble. He's doubting himself. This is actually, I love this sequence here because there's just a lot of funny things that happen. Don attacks Bebop, who's eating spaghetti, and then Bebop uses the spaghetti to tie Donatello up, which is kind of funny. Raphael confronts Rocksteady, and Rocksteady blows a giant bubble around him and then blows him up into the air. And then Mikey gets distracted by a giant pizza, of course, and that giant pizza turns out to be a trap. The one side opens up and he falls to his death. You know, as you probably know, Leo's probably pretty hungry. Leo attacks Bebop and Rocksteady on his own, and what's really cool is when he hits them, they turn into punching bags, but then they come back and hit him and knock him over. Now that Leo's defenseless, Shredder sends some vicious poodles after him, and the one actually bites his foot, and then they push him back into a cauldron of soup. And here is where Shredder delivers the best line, you know, a killer line. He says, "You're in the soup now. Turtle soup, that is." And that, of course, is when Leo wakes up, right before he gets eaten. As I said before, during this dream sequence, Leonardo was doubting himself. He wasn't leading the team. So this leads Leonardo to think that he's losing his ability to lead. So he leaves the Turtles. And as you can expect, this episode deals with him eventually finding the confidence to lead the Turtles again. In the meantime, there are some really cool things that happen. I love how the Turtles all take turns trying to lead the team, but they just can't fill Leonardo's shoes. And I also really love that in this episode, the Shredder and Krang bury New York City in piles and piles of snow. I'm a big fan of snow, so it doesn't take much snow to make me happy. It was really nice seeing them here. I loved seeing the polar bear in this episode. It reminds me of Tora from the arcade game on NES. I also really love Shredder and Krang's winter clothes. You know, I would buy variants of them in those winter clothes. It's cool. Even April puts on some winter gear here. And if NECA really wanted to mine this episode anymore, they could make these like little boots that the Ninja Turtle, I shouldn't say little because they're adults, but they could use these boots, these snow boots that they wear in this episode as they're trying to track down the Shredder and Krang. And furthermore, they could also make this cool guard bot that Shredder and Krang use to guard them from attackers in their building as they're draining the sun of its solar power. The NECA chef's hat fits on the Shredder really well. You have to take off this brim blade thing, And you can put that on his head like so. And that's exactly how it is in the cartoon. Looks really good, actually. I like that. You would have thought, though, that they would have included those utensils that he's holding, but no. You just got the chef's hat. Maybe they'll include that in a future accessory pack. Accelerate. I guess I'm hungry. Bebop and Rocksteady also wear a chef's hat in Pizza by the Shred. Can you put this on Bebop's head? No. Can you put it on Rocksteady's head? No. It falls off. But you could trick it. I mean, you could do what you can to try to get that to stay on there. I think if you can balance it, it might actually work out for you. And then, of course, there's many times throughout the series where the Ninja Turtles wear a chef's hat. I don't think Donatello ever did. I have to check my reference, but no, the chef's hat does not stay on their head if you were hoping to put that on them. Up next is the graphics disc from Cowabunga Shredhead. In this episode, the Shredder takes this graphics disc to this amazing looking building so he can put it in a holographic synthesizer to make a dimensional hologram of the surfer turtle Michelangelo. The graphics disc has everything they know about Michelangelo on it. Even stuff I don't even understand, like his memories. But one thing I really love is in the beginning of this scene, Bebop and Rocksteady are cleaning this place up. You know, and they're doing a good job. But then the Shredder arrives in the pneumatic module and he makes a complete mess. And then he blames them and tells them to clean it up. Can you believe that crap? Something I have to point out here too is Krang's voice is different in this episode. It's not Pat Fraley. When I looked it up, it said that it was Townsend Coleman, or I think that's maybe what it's on, like, you know, TMNT Wiki or something like that. But I kind of feel like it might be Cam Clark. I'm not 100% sure. Is it definitely Townsend Coleman? Let me know. All right. About Shredder's plan about making a dimensional hologram of Michelangelo. I kind of feel like this plan is kind of dumb, all right? Because, look, like, he wants to use this, like, glowing hologram to infiltrate the turtle's lair. How does this holographic projection of Michelangelo know where the lair is? Like I said, it doesn't make any sense. He knows everything that Michelangelo knows. Don't you think the turtles will be suspicious of this intangible glowing turtle? I would be, to be honest with you. But soon after the Shredder talks to Bebop and Rocksteady and shows them this Michelangelo hologram, Bebop shoves the graphics disc into the holographic synthesizer backwards, and it causes the machine to go haywire. It blasts these beams all over the place, and then one of them actually hits the Shredder right in the head. Now, everything Krang and Shredder know about Mikey is sent right to the Shredder's head, and he thinks he is Michelangelo. Again, for some reason, not only does he know how to act like Michelangelo, he also knows how to get to the turtle lair, because he shows up at the turtle lair with a bunch of boxes of pizza. Like, how? How did this happen? I feel like the Shredder found out about the lair earlier in the series, and he's just been playing games the whole time. Like, you know, not just directly go into there to, like, fight them or anything like that. He, like, acts like, oh, I don't know where they are. Where are they at? I've actually talked about this episode before. I think I discussed it when I was talking either animation in the series or just the turtle likenesses. I know there was a point where I was showing, you know, the Ninja Turtles in different episodes. I really like this episode, not necessarily because of the story, because I feel like the story is just a stereotypical bad guy thinks he's a good guy. Like, that always happens in cartoons. What I really like about this episode, though, is this just the variation in animation quality throughout the whole thing. Sometimes the shots like look bad. Like some, or like the models of the characters look bad. Like look at Mikey here. Look at his eyes. He looks like a freaking crazy person. And then sometimes in the episode, the guys, they look okay, but they look off model, you know? Like Raph here looks more of like a, I don't know, he almost looks more like a frog or something like that than a turtle, like the shape of his head. But then there's other shots where the animation is super fluid and it looks almost like a Disney afternoon cartoon. Like the characters are super expressive. I'm not really sure what happened here. I'm not sure. I don't know. The way I kind of think about it is maybe different shots were storyboarded by different people here before they sent it to Korea and then, or wherever they sent this animation to be done. I think it's Korea. And then over there, they did their best to match the storyboards. Either that, or maybe it could be different animation studios were doing different shots. But I kind of feel like the story, like the super fluid animation, to me, I don't know, I kind of feel like it was probably boarded that way. Maybe I'm wrong. So anyways, in this episode, Splinter uses his hypnotic powers a little bit. Earlier in the episode, he hypnotized Mikey into craving pizza no more because Mikey ate all the Ninja Turtles pizza. Can you believe that? And here in this scene, he uses it to interrogate the Shredder. You know, he gets behind him and talks to him. And all he really finds out is that Shredder thinks he's Michelangelo and that his mission is to serve the cool forces of good, to obey his totally hip master Splinter, and when possible, consume mondo portions of pizza. All right. And earlier when he hypnotizes Mikey, he calls his hypnotic technique the Kung Pao technique. Mikey's not too happy about Shredder moving in on his territory, you know, as the party dude. He gets a little butthurt about it, and he tries to leave a cool off on his cheapskate, but the Shredder kind of fights him over it. Like they kind of fight who can leave on the cheapskate and ride it. Now here you would think that being like an 80s cartoon, you would think that maybe there would be like a little moral thing here because Mikey's actually kind of acting out a little bit. He's being a little aggressive. He just shoves the Shredder right off the cheapskate, and Shredder didn't even really do anything. I mean, he thinks he's Michelangelo, so he's not really going to do anything that's bad. You know, he's a good guy, essentially, and Mikey is just shoving him off of there. But don't worry, the Shredder pushes Mikey right back off the cheapskate. During this altercation, Shredder actually drops the graphics disc on the ground, and Donatello picks it up. As Michelangelo goes off on his own way, Don, Raph, Leo, and Shredder Mikey head to the Channel 6 news building so they can use April's computers to read the drive. Now, this is kind of funny because, you know, as I said before, Shredder thinks he's Michelangelo, and he actually wears Michelangelo's disguise. He's got that, you know, ugly face on top of his metallic helmet. Those are some magical masks, I tell you. After putting the graphics disc into her computer, everybody sees that the graphics disc contains information about Michelangelo. Donatello guesses that it must be some sort of hologram program, and he figures that the Shredder plans on cloning Michelangelo. As this is happening, the real Michelangelo went to Vinny's Pizza to sulk over his problems. But unfortunately, as I said before, Splinter hypnotized him, and this pizza will do nothing for him. You know, this is not going to cheer him up. I think it's funny, if you look at all those pizzas on the wall, they all look exactly the same. Like, there's no, like, mushroom, no pepperoni. It's all just a big mess of different objects. As if things weren't bad enough for Michelangelo, Bebop and Rocksteady show up to Vinny's too. And here's, again, like I said, I love this animation here. You see some things that you'll never see in any other episodes. Like, I love this close-up of Rocksteady. I really like that thick ink line. And like I said, he looks very expressive. He looks very expressive in this shot right here, where he looks like he's kind of like happily evil. And then Bebop snorts right here, and just you could see that there's just some squash and stretch happening in the face. It's not as stiff as a lot of the other animation is in the series. So the villains go harass Mikey inside of Vinny's. He sprays them in the face with his soda, and then they just start shooting everywhere, right? I mentioned this before in my Turtles in Disguise video, but here's a clear example of the animators not wanting to show the guys taking off their pants. Now, I said in that video that I wasn't sure if it was due to, the company just not wanting to show the turtles taking off their pants in a kid's cartoon. Maybe they thought it was inappropriate, or if it's just them taking like a shortcut. I'm not sure. But here you can see Michelangelo starts to roll on the floor, and he's pulling off his coat, and then magically, like 1 frame later, his pants just disappear. Next, Bebop and Rocksteady capture Mikey, and I kind of feel like the placement of this faucet is not the best. All right. After they take Mikey away, Raph, Leo, and the Shredder show up to Vinny's looking for Mikey. But it's too late. Mikey and the villains are gone. I think it's pretty funny here. It almost kind of looks like Shredder jumps out of the turtle van like a ballerina. While they inspect the joint, Shredder, Mikey, eats some pizza. And then when he sees a cheese shredder, his memory reverts back to his original nasty self. He turns evil, and he whacks the guys with a pizza peel. He knocks them right into these robotic arms because this is a very high-tech pizza shop. And this thing, rolls them in some pizza dough and puts them on this conveyor belt. And this conveyor belt leads them to fiery death. I kind of feel like this is one of the most Batman things in this whole series. Back at the Channel 6 news building, Donatello is able to access more info on Shredder's graphics disk. They managed to boot up Phase 2, the master plan. What could that be? Well, Shredder and Krang plan on replacing the president with a hologram. Of course, get the turtles out of the way today, tomorrow, take over the White House. Over on the Shredder side of things, as I said before, the Shredder put the turtles on this conveyor belt leading to fire. And this conveyor belt is moving at a pretty decent pace. It's not moving super slow or anything like that. But the Shredder, of course, leaves them because he doesn't want to make sure that they die or anything like that. He travels back to his base of operations. So, I don't know, 5 to 15 minutes, depending on how far away it is in the city. At his base, he discusses Phase 2 with Krang. Krang tells him that once they replace the president, the Shredder will become the vice president. I'm voting Shredder 2028. He also realizes that he must have dropped the graphics disc at some point, and most likely the turtles have it. So then he has to head back to Vinny's Pizza to ask them for it. And, the guys, Raph and Leo, are still on this conveyor belt. They haven't gone into the fire yet. How? How has this not killed them yet? I kind of feel like they've been on this thing for an hour. Shredder threatens Leonardo and Raph. He demands that they give him the graphics disc. But don't worry. They say Michelangelo, and it turns him into Michelangelo. Everyone reunites with Donatello, and they discuss Phase 2. They all decide that they need to find Shredder's holographic synthesizer and destroy it. And of course, save Michelangelo while doing it. So first thing they do is Donatello reprograms the graphics disc. Next, Leo and Raph get back on the conveyor belt, wrap themselves up in pizza. They change Shredder back into the Shredder. Next, they give up the graphics disc. so that he can head back to his base and they can follow him. Oh, hey, look! They don't need to save Michelangelo. He was there the entire time. But where's Leo? Oh no, not Leonardo. So inside Shredder's base, Shredder puts the graphics disc back into the holographic synthesizer. And what's going to come out? Well, what comes out is an infinite number of dancing Michelangelos. That's what he looks like to me. He looks like he's dancing. And yes, I know he's probably doing like a form or something like that, but I don't know. Just looks like dancing to me. So Bebop and Rocksteady become frustrated because there's all these turtles around. They start blasting their rifles, and you know exactly what's going to happen. They hit the machine. Surprisingly, they don't completely destroy it. Shredder ejects the disc to make all the Mikeys disappear, except for the real one, who's holding a sword here for some reason. You'd think that this would be it, like, you know, Shredder, Bebop, and Rocksteady would take off, but no, there's actually like a real quick turn where the Shredder actually uses his machine to destroy one of Raphael's sais, and he also uses the machine to capture the guys in sort of like a energy shell. But just as quickly as that all takes place, they, you know, say Michelangelo again, and he turns back into Michelangelo. He shoots the holographic synthesizer with a stun rifle. This time, it actually deals a killing blow to the machine. It causes the machine to explode, but just before it does, it sends out one final beam to the Shredder's head and erases all of the Michelangelo information from his brain. And that's it. Goodbye, holographic synthesizer, and goodbye, graphics disc. So here's NECA's graphics disc. What's funny to me is I couldn't find one shot where you actually see the top of this thing. At least where it looks like this, because this is like the classic top of a floppy disk. Every time you see it, you always see the bottom. But this is what the top should look like, right? You got this little sticker right here where you can write down what the contents are. You know, something like favorite pizza recipes when really it's April O'Neil vacation pics. You gotta... That's what the turtles do to hide from Splinter. But there's only one shot where you actually see the other side of this thing, and that's here. At least that's what all I have in my reference. But here, there's nothing there. You know, it's like completely blank. Usually when you see this thing, you see this side right here. You know, almost every single time you see it, basically every time I have saved from the episode and screenshotted, it was this bottom side. So I don't really think you see the other side as it's laid out here. What's funny to me about that is every time they insert this thing into some computer, they always put it in upside down. I mean, even Donatello holds this thing upside down. Like every time they're staring at the floppy disk, they're looking at the bottom of it. I don't know what happened there, but there's a mistake, right? Because this is the bottom. And the detail on this looks really nice. It looks pretty much just like the cartoon does. There is more of like an angle, like right here. It's not necessarily so square on the one side of the disc, the floppy disk, but, you know, it's fine. I don't know why they didn't do that. Maybe they can't make that small of a cut. Who knows? The only thing that's really missing here is right in this corner, there's supposed to be a square that's painted black. And for whatever reason, they did not paint it black. Although you can see it's raised. There's like a square there raised. So maybe they originally intended to paint it. Maybe mine is messed up and yours does have a black square there. Maybe they made some paint app cuts and they just couldn't afford that black paint. Next up is the Amulet. This comes from another Season 3 episode. That one is Super Bebop and Mighty Rocksteady. That's the amazing episode where Bebop and Rocksteady are replaced by robotic versions of themselves. Even though the name sounds like it should have been an episode where they become superheroes. That's just my opinion, I guess. I've discussed this episode before, so I'll keep it brief. In this episode, the Shredder tries to have Bebop and Rocksteady place a mesmerizer on top of the Channel 6 news building. The mesmerizer turns every human into a mindless zombie ready for Shredder's control. Bebop and Rocksteady have to do it because mutants are immune to the mesmerizer's effects. They fail, of course, as if they wouldn't. So Krang decides to replace them with robots and send Shredder along with them to make sure the plan goes according to plan, all right? But you might be wondering, well, how can Shredder go if the mesmerizer mesmerizes human beings? Well, Krang gives him this amulet to wear around his neck. The amulet shields the Shredder against the mesmerizer's mind-controlling effects. Shredder and the robotic mutants arrive at the Channel 6 news building, right in the main lobby fountain. How embarrassing. Shredder's all wet. Shredder heads to the roof to install the mesmerizer while Super Bebop and Mighty Rocksteady stay downstairs to guard the building. Now, I didn't mention it before, but earlier in the episode, when Bebop and Rocksteady failed to put the mesmerizer on top of the Channel 6 news building, they actually damaged it. So instead of putting everyone under the Shredder's spell, it makes everybody act like children. Because the mesmerizer is not working as it should, Krang sends the real Bebop and Rocksteady to Earth with a schematic disc that will fix the mesmerizer. And of course, Bebop and Rocksteady take the wrong schematic disc. The turtles get their hands on it. And what do you think that schematics disc is? Why, it's the schematics for robotic and Bebop and Rocksteady. So with this information, Donnie's able to reprogram the robots. Because they don't have the disc, Bebop and Rocksteady try to fix the mesmerizer themselves, and they end up changing its settings, so now the mesmerizer turns everyone into dogs, and then eventually monkeys. As the end of the episode starts to move along, Super Bebop and Mighty Rocksteady go up on the roof and they start dancing with the Shredder, because remember, they are reprogrammed. For no real reason, they just kind of blow up. During all of the confusion, the turtles run up onto the roof, and Donnie notices the amulet protects the Shredder from the mesmerizer. So without any resistance, Donnie's able to pull the amulet off of the Shredder, and now Shredder gains the mind of a monkey. Only for a short period of time, because the mesmerizer is destroyed. Everyone goes back to normal, except Vernon. And, they don't show the Shredder and the real Bebop and Rocksteady escape at the end of this one. It just kind of goes to the guys eating pizza in a pizza shop. The story of this episode isn't, it's nothing amazing. It's cool stuff. My favorite thing about it is robotic Bebop and Rocksteady. They just look really awesome in this, and I love how dangerous they seem. Here's NECA's amulet, and now I finally feel like Shredder is accessorizing. There we go. The more I take this piece off of his head, the more it kind of loosens up. It falls out a lot more regularly now, unfortunately. But yes, you have to put this amulet down on top of his cape, because that's how it was in the cartoon. Then you plop his head down on top of there, and now look at him. Now he looks pretty swanky. In the cartoon, depending on what shot you look at, the amulet can be very simple. Even the band looks very simple. But sometimes it can be very detailed and look really, really nice. I mean, look at it here. It looks really cool. Like, there's a lot of detail in that stone. Sometimes also the stone glows, but that only happens when the mesmerizer is running, so it's not all the time. Here you can see NECA didn't really put much detail into either the stone or the band. I mean, it looks nice. It's just not as detailed as it could be. I mean, the only thing I would say is I kind of wish that the stone was like more of a blue color. That way there was actually some kind of contrast between the stone and the band here, because, I mean, it kind of runs right into each other, and there's there just isn't much separation between the stone and the metal. Up next is Shredder Bucks. This comes from another Season 3 episode. That episode is Shredderville. In this one, the turtles dream what the world would be like if the turtles didn't exist. In the dream, the Shredder rules New York City, of course, and the turtles encounter Shredder Bucks when they try to use regular cash in a store. The owner tells them that their money is no good, and the only good money in town is, this Shredder cash here. And now, unfortunately, Donnie can't buy those Mickey Mouse ears he wanted to pick up. There's not much else to really say about this episode, except how did all the turtles dream the same thing at the same time? Here's NECA's Shredder Bucks, and the detail on this thing looks really nice. It looks very similar to what was shown in the cartoon. I'm pretty sure it's exactly the same thing, but, this thing is so small, unless you zoom in on it, I find it really hard to read. I don't know if it's maybe because I'm going blind or what, but, zooming in, you can see all that fine detail in the sticker. You can see Shredder's head. It says, "In Shredder We Trust" on top. It looks really, really nice. And here's the back, and it's really funny. You can actually see the human version of Bebop and Rocksteady on there, so that's pretty cool. Again, I never would have noticed that unless I zoomed in and took a look at this thing up close. Up next is a Season 4, finally. We're moving out of Season 3. Episode item. This is a picture of Shredder's mom. Now, I honestly hate Shredder's mom. I do not like her at all. And there's not actually a picture of her in that episode, in a frame like this. I think this is just kind of like NECA throwing everyone a bone so they don't have to produce a Shredder's mom action figure, which I'm perfectly fine with. I don't need one. So first, I just want to say that the episode's opening line is one of my favorite lines in the series. Mikey says, "Hey, Master Splinter, want to watch bad-tempered vegetable zombies from Mars?" And Splinter replies, "No thank you, Michelangelo. I have already read the book." Now that actually made me laugh when I watched it. In this episode, the Shredder threatens that if the world leaders don't surrender the world to him, the Shredder and Krang will increase the world's temperature, and we'll face global warming like we've never experienced before. I like how a few times when Shredder's in the TV in this episode, it appears like the classic Shredder in the TV. Just kind of like the NES game. Only here his hand isn't sticking outside the screen. So Shredder plans to raise the world's temperature in this episode by moving a solar mirror satellite next to the sun. The solar mirror satellite will send direct sun rays through a portal and out another portal that's right next to the Earth. Because the sun rays don't have to travel as far, the Earth begins to boil. Shredder's mom sees this broadcast, and she wants a piece of the Shredder's action. So she heads to the United World Plaza, where the Shredder is supposed to meet with the world leaders. Currently, she's staying at the Fort Lauderdale Home for Retired Villains. Now, Shredder's mom must still have some strength in her osteoporosis-filled body because she's able to toss around an orderly like he's nothing as she's leaving the retirement home. Even though things are starting to heat up on the Earth, the world leaders tell Shredder that they're not going to give in to his demands. At this point, that's when the Shredder's mom arrives at the World Plaza and confronts him. She treats him like a little baby. She keeps on calling him Sonny. She tries to give him a hug, but he sort of resists, and I don't blame him because, man, she's missing quite a lot of teeth. Like, I know you're my mom and all, but you're one nasty-ass lady. It's so embarrassing for poor Shredder. The two of them go back to the Technodrome, and Shredder's mom continues to insult him in front of Krang. She insults Krang's decorating skills, but even so, Krang acts like he kind of likes her. He starts to grow fond of her. She also tells the Shredder, though, that she doesn't like his friends. One's all brains, and the other two are no brains. On the Turtles side of things, The turtles befriend General Yogurt, and he takes them in a spaceship into the portal next to the Earth so they can, stop this solar mirror satellite. But what's weird is they go through the portal and it takes them to Dimension X. Like, I don't understand why. Like, that's not how I understood these portals are working. It's not like you're going, the sun beams are going through a portal next to the sun and then traveling through Dimension X through one portal and into another portal and then down to Earth. It's going directly, from what I understood, from the sun right to the Earth. So why does it take them to Dimension X? I'm also willing to accept that maybe there's a sun in Dimension X that they're reflecting the sunlight from, but when they show the satellite in the Dimension X sky, there's no sun around it. It's just there in the middle of, open air. And I don't know. They kind of like they lose the whole sunlight angle or something like that. Now they're acting as if it's almost just kind of like a ray. Like I don't. Somebody messed up here. But anyways, now they're by the Technodrome and they crash on that little island that the Technodrome is sitting on. Inside the Technodrome, Shredder's mom continues to embarrass the Shredder in front of his pals, and Krang raises the heat even higher. So things are really starting to cook down on the Earth. The villains spot the turtles climbing up the Technodrome, so Shredder leaves to confront them. His mom calls him a jerk who's going off without any thoughts in his head, just criticizing all the Shredder's plans. Shredder's mom tries to do it better. She has Krang put out a dummy antenna to distract the turtles from the real antenna. Once they destroy that and head inside the Technodrome, she tricks them into entering the Technodrome's garbage compactor. She tricks them with a sign that reads, "This way to the computer room." And, they, to their credit, they do know that it's a trap, but they go that direction anyways. But then once they're in the trash compactor, it starts to compact, and then they see another sign that's actually a real sign that says, "This way leads to the central computer." So they just pull up a piece of sheet metal and go that direction. The guys confront Krang, Shredder, and his mama, but once again, Shredder's mom makes Shredder look inadequate because she traps the turtles in a force field. This, again, irritates the Shredder, and he leaves the room. So Shredder's, she's not all business. Even though she delights in the pain and suffering of others, she also has a soft spot for some men, I guess, because she's easily defeated when General Yogurt starts to hit on her. She tells him, what all the buttons on the console do, and he pushes the one that frees the turtle, and then she gets trapped in her own little force field. Young love. It'll ruin you. So, after the turtles destroy the solar mirrors, they escape. And Shredder finally does what everyone's wanted him to do this entire episode. He throws his mom through a portal directly into the sun. No, he just transports her back to a retirement home. Yeah, a little underwhelmed by that. And this episode is not bad. I find her irritating. She's just always calling him Sonny the whole time. So I guess she's irritating me as well as the Shredder. Here's Shredder's mom in picture form. Hopefully this is all we get, If they made Shredder's mom, I probably would end up getting her, but I'd hate myself in the morning. I really would. The likeness of this is actually really good. It looks really nice. I like the frame. We've seen it before. I really like how NECA makes these fake pictures of characters who, I don't know, probably won't ever get a standard action figure release, but they still paid somebody money to take the time to sculpt these things in 3D, which I think is really, really neat. So maybe they'll make a box set eventually of all the figures in the picture frames that we never got before. Coming to San Diego Comic-Con 2026. Finally, here is the diary of the Kojima brothers. That comes from the Season 5 episode, My Brother, the Bad Guy. In this episode, we're introduced to Shredder's brother, Lieutenant Kazuha Saki. So this, along with Shredder's mom's name, messes up the whole Oroku Saki name, because Oroku is the family name and Saki is supposed to be like his first name, right? This is only fixed in the other episode, The Legend of Koji, where Shredder's ancestor's name is Oroku Sancho. So they got it right there. But I forgot to mention, because it's actually not ever mentioned in the episode, but it's in the actual Amazon credits, Shredder's mom's name is Miyoko Saki. So Miyoko Saki, Kazuha Saki, and Oroku Saki. She even calls him Oroku whenever she's in her retirement home. I guess these silly Americans didn't understand how the Japanese last names work. I mean, I don't understand it either. Like when you see like Akira Toriyama, which is the first name and which is the last name? Because they read right to left. So I don't understand it. Well, I should probably look that up and quit being ignorant, right? But in this episode, Shredder steals the diary of the Kojima brothers from the Ninja Hall of Fame. Now, what's funny here is the ninjas there, those are statues of the Kojima brothers. And already they got like blue skin, like they're going to appear later on in the episode. So after Shredder steals the diary, he leaves, and then his brother Kazuha shows up to investigate. Kazuha uses some kind of fingerprint detector, and he learns that his brother Oroku, is the one that stole the diary. And then the hunt is on. Brother versus brother. Back at the Shredder's hideout, the Shredder uses some electronic equipment that he's recently stolen and the diary to create Kojima brother holograms. Now, I'm going to mess this up, but he says the Kojima brothers were warriors of the dreaded Kuwasu ninja clan. I think that's how you pronounce it. They lived 300 years ago. These holograms are solid, but they still need a holographic projector to exist. So what I don't understand is why didn't he just use the diary and some equipment in the Technodrome to create robots of them? But what I think is really funny here is Shredder tries to prove to Krang how powerful these new Kojima brother holograms are, right? And he has them slice and dice a set of stuffed turtle dummies. Now, I hate to break it to you, Shredhead, but if you give any 5-year-old a sword, he'll be able to turn stuffed dummies into mincemeat. It's not that impressive. And anyone else think that these dummies actually look like the Mirage Ninja Turtles? They all have red headbands, plus the faces. On the turtle side of things, the guys meet and team up with Oroku Saki's brother, Kazuha. They sort of butt heads a little bit, but they still get along okay. Kazuha actually tries to drive the turtle van as Leonardo's driving it, which I find highly emasculating. It's like you don't do that to another man. But Kazuha complains about Leo breaking the speed limit and stuff. But, the guys get along enough to take him down to their sewer lair. The guys speculate why the Shredder stole some holographic electronic equipment. Surprisingly, Splinter actually references Cowabunga Shredhead here, where he says the last time Shredder used holographic equipment, he tried to kidnap the president. So you're getting some episode continuity there. And they discuss why they think the Shredder may be trying to steal a fusion reactor. This was actually discussed earlier on in the episode. They didn't show the Shredder try to break into to steal the fusion reactor, but it was reported by April. Kazuha wants to believe that his brother isn't up to, trying to fry the city, but the Turtles think he could be up to anything, which I don't blame them. The Shredder's always trying something new. But the Turtles and Kazuha head to the reactor, expecting to find the Shredder, and what they find on the way is the holographic Kojima brothers. Kazuha leaves the Turtles by themselves so they can take on the holograms, and he goes to confront the Shredder. The fight between the Turtles and the Kojima brothers is actually pretty slow-paced. it's nothing exciting. But the Kojima brothers actually managed to overpower the Turtle brothers. Splinter actually senses this. He senses that the turtles are in trouble, so he leaves the sewer lair to go help them. When he arrives, he sees exactly what we see. A very boring fight. A very boring fight between these holograms and the guys, with nobody making any really cool ninja attacks. So Splinter is able to get the holograms' attention by telling them that they are Kuwashu ninjas, and that they've been dead for centuries, and he doesn't believe in ghosts. They attack, and at first, it's cool for about 5 seconds. Mikey actually uses his grappling hook to attack. One of the Kojima brothers throws knives and knocks Leo's swords out of his hands. But then Donnie finds Shredder's projector, and he smashes it, and then they disappear. So, like I said, why would you make a hologram or a holographic projector that can easily be destroyed? When Kazuha confronts the Shredder says that Kazuha is his baby brother. And then he says, "So mommy finally let you put on long pants, huh?" So, I kind of get the feeling like maybe Shredder's mom isn't evil in this episode. Maybe aren't thinking of the continuity where Shredder's mom is evil and living in a retirement home for evil super beings or whatever. Not to mention, throughout the episode, Kazuha mentions a few times that Oroku Saki is disgracing the family. So it just kind of sounds like maybe Saki or Oroku Saki is a black sheep. Now, sadly, Oroku Saki tells Kazuha that he's ashamed of having a brother as a cop. It's so upsetting when you have these sibling problems like this. And then Shredder handcuffs Kazuha to some machinery, and he leaves him for dead as the Technodrome is being magnetized to the Earth. Shredder says he only has 5 minutes to live. So this fusion reactor at some unnamed university manages to pull the Technodrome into our dimension from Dimension X, but as it comes to Earth, Donatello realigns the polarity of the magnet, the magnet's electrostatic impedance, I think he says, which pushes it into the frozen Arctic. And that's where it stays for the majority of season 5, which is cool. I like it being up there, but or down there, I guess. So the Kojima brother thing in this episode is pretty underwhelming. They don't really do anything cool. There's never a time where the Shredder shows the cool things about what's inside of the diary. It's just kind of there, I guess. They probably could have made a whole episode of the Shredder trying to get the diary of the Kojima brothers and then finally getting it during maybe the second act or something like that and creating these robotic Kojima brothers. And then the whole third act could have been the guys fighting these super powerful Kojima brother robots or even holograms if he wants to use the holographic projector. But I don't know, just the fight was kind of boring. So here is the Kojima Brothers diary, the very final accessory we're going to look at. I mean, basically this looks good, right? I got no problems with this. It looks nice. The detail is fine. In the cartoon, you see this thing open a lot, but you actually do see the whole book, or the cover of the book, whenever he's, I don't know, ranting at some Kojima Brother statues. Getting basic items like this really does make you want to get a bookshelf or something. You could put these all in the Ninja Turtle lair. Or did Donnie's... I never opened up my Donnie laboratory yet, so I don't even know if that has a shelf you could put books on. But this is very nice looking. They did screw it up in the cartoon because Japanese people read from they read right to left. So, this is obviously a book that's read left to right. I was also kind of wondering, what do you think this symbol is supposed to stand for? Like, obviously Kojima or whatever, but why this? It looks like a 7. The several-month-old NECA Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fred Wolf Shredder is not only an excellent take on the animated original Shredhead, but he's quite possibly the best-looking Shredder I've ever seen. It only took them 38 years, but they finally got it right. Finally! I would lie and say I had a lot of fun posing this guy on top of the turtle van, but because of the angle of the roof, he fell off a lot, but still. I liked putting him in all these action poses, you know, beating up the Ninja Turtles. I do have one major complaint, though. His gripping hands are way too big. He can hold these brand new accessories just fine, but when it comes to all the older items, his grips are way too big. They don't stay in his hands, you know. As I was posing him with the swords, you know, either the original Shredder sword or the sword of Yurikawa, you know, they would wiggle all about. They would tilt forward, or they would just fall out when I was moving them around. Later on, I tried to include some shots of him holding the Retro Mutagen Ray Generator. That is way too small. You can put it in his hand, but, you know, it just doesn't look right. I show him holding the Muta Shooter, which he does okay. He holds that okay, but he doesn't have a trigger finger, so you can't, like, get to look just right. He can hold the Muta-Zoo ray gun, but again, without the trigger finger, it's a little off. Plus, the handle on that is very small to fit in Baxter's hand. I think what they ought to do in the future is, whenever they release Accessory Pack 2, if they ever do one, they should include some smaller gripping hands for Shredder, because, I don't know, you can't, like, make swords with bigger handles for him to hold. It would just look weird. We need smaller gripping hands. Also, my other complaint is, after changing out the brim of the helmet a few times, it has become very loose, and it falls out all the time when you're trying to move them around. If you made it all the way here, thank you so much for watching. This one took a very long time to put together. I think, 3 months? 2 months or something like that? You know, off and on, but, you know, it's done, and I'm glad it's here for you to check out. Hopefully you learned something new. And hopefully I didn't miss anything really important, you know. Hopefully you're not angry at me in the comments because I missed some shot of the Shredder where he didn't have a mask on. I'll feel so stupid about it. But if I did, let me know. So, thanks for watching. Have a good one, and talk to you later.